If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
You are listening to Mindshock True Crime. This is the Madeleine McCann case. Now, this is, of course, one of the most famous missing persons cases or missing children cases in the whole world, in modern history. And it has a lot of moving pieces, and it has been requested to be covered by Mindshock in typical Mindshock fashion, exploring every avenue, every theory in comprehensive and exhaustive fashion. And of course, we do have the news of a suspect recently connected, or at least recently publicly announced, connected to this disappearance and other crimes, who was in the area. Now, there's a number of suspects. There were burglars. I mean, a lot of people think the parents are responsible, not necessarily intentionally murdering their child, but some kind of accidental death, possibly a drugging. And there's been much speculation there. And then even still, there are far more sinister theories, including trafficking rings with political connections. Now, of course, even uttering those words would have been met with a lot of chastising by the coincidence theorists. But now that all of the conspiracy theorists that were providing plenty of critical thinking, deductive reasoning, and logical analysis in making these connections without sticking their head in the sand of coincidence theory, where everything is just a coincidence, and there can never be high-ranking officials that are not acting alone. I don't know why, but yeah, and especially with 2020 being the year that it was, and 2019 being the year that it was, and 2020 thus far, I mean, who knows what the rest of the year will bring. It's been a very, very strange and tragic year with a lot of political manipulation by many different people. And so we will be diving deep and exploring this case from top to bottom. If you enjoyed the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. If you like the podcast, hit the like button. Share it across social media platforms. Questions, comments, thoughts, theories, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings. Leave them in the comments section. You could also check us out on Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, and Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case, topic, co-podcaster requests. So, for those that don't know, Madeleine McCann was a 3-year-old who disappeared May 3rd, 2007 from Praia da Luz, a resort in the Algarve region of Portugal, from a holiday apartment. And newspapers called this the most heavily reported missing person case in modern history. As of today, her whereabouts remain unknown. So this was a UK family, and what's more perplexing is she was not an only child. So there are 3 children. So other than Madeleine, there were 2 twin 2-year-olds who were left alone in this apartment by parents Kate and Jerry McCann. Now, also, there were 7 friends, and among them 8 children totaled. So, other than the McCanns 3, there were also 5 other children, and this was a group of 7 adults that were friends, plus the McCanns. So 9 adults, 8 children in this vacationing group. Now, again, I haven't looked at the statistics specifically to see what the rate of abductions amongst multiple families traveling together are versus families traveling alone. But it seems like, obviously, the easier targets would be parents or a single parent with 1 child, logistically. Now, obviously, there are crimes of opportunity, and there's also a lot of other funny business involved. Some believe the parents are involved, some believe the parents are not involved. And, of course, there's multiple scenarios for either of those possibilities. So apparently, at roughly 8:30, this is a ground floor apartment, by the way. At 8:30 at night, they had left Madeleine and the twins to dine in a restaurant which is roughly 180 feet away. So it's not an incredible distance. People that actually, online researchers that have been to the area, say that the apartment is not visible from the restaurant's patio because the view is obstructed by bushes and also by plastic windscreens that shield the side of the patio, that were shielding that side of the patio during that night. The other thing, I'm not sure how often this specifically is brought up, but in casual discussion, people don't usually bring up the fact that the McCanns had been on holiday at this exact resort several times. So perhaps that led them to thinking that it was safer than it was. Because if you're in a familiar area, that's a little different than going somewhere for the first time. And especially if you're constantly dining at that particular restaurant. Now, what's a little bit bizarre is apparently the resort did have nannies that could have been used instead of leaving 3 children under the age of 4 alone in an apparently unlocked apartment. So, another theory that I haven't seen floated too much that I'll be going into more later is if Madeleine somehow, either through sleepwalking or whatever, she got up herself, walked out the apartment, and something happened to her somewhere else. There's, because some people point to the possibility that if you're some kind of human trafficker and you want to steal children, or even just you're some psycho, are you also going to take the twins, or would you rather steal one or both twins instead of the 3-year-old? Particularly if this is a dark, dark business, but if people are trafficking children or selling children to people who want children, I don't know what kind of markets there are there. If they can't go through adoption or whatever, or worse still, some kind of satanic occult rings, would the younger the child be more desirable? Particularly, it'd be a little bit easier to control the younger the child if they're still infants. If they're still babies, infants, they were not quite 2 years old. So Madeleine was a 3-year-old. I don't know. It's all quite bizarre. Okay, so apparently the parents did check on the children throughout the evening, but Madeleine's mother, Kate McCann, apparently discovered that Madeleine was missing at 10 p.m. So there were problems with DNA analysis, there were problems with the police, there were problems with everything. The Portuguese police theorized that Madeleine had died in an accident in the apartment and that the parents had covered it up. The McCanns were given arguido, which is suspect status, in September 2007. So May 3rd, 2007 was the night of disappearance. And the case was archived July 2008 because of lack of evidence by Portugal's Attorney General. So let's go through the specific details here. I will be referencing the Wikipedia with multiple other references. Her whereabouts remain unknown. German prosecutors in 2020 have stated that they assume that she is dead. And before we get to all the new information, we will go through this basic overview. Madeleine was on holiday from the UK with her parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, her 2-year-old twin siblings, and a group of family friends and their children. She and the twins had been left asleep at 8:30 in the ground floor apartment while the McCanns and friends dined in a restaurant 55 meters, 180 feet away. The parents checked on the children throughout the evening until Madeleine's mother discovered she was missing at 10 p.m. Over the following weeks, particularly after misinterpreting a British DNA analysis, the Portuguese police came to believe that Madeleine had died in an accident in the apartment and that her parents had covered it up. Okay, the McCanns were given suspect status. The parents continued the investigation using private detectives until Scotland Yard opened its own inquiry, Operation Grange, in 2011. The senior investigating officer announced that he was treating the disappearance as, quote, a criminal act by a stranger, end quote, most likely a planned abduction or burglary gone wrong. In 2013, Scotland Yard released EFIT images of men they wanted to trace, including one of a man seen carrying a child toward the beach that night. So the reference for this is a Guardian article, UK News. British detectives release EFITs of Madeleine McCann suspect. Despite being placed at the crime scene by two people on the night in question, the man has never come forward. The face of a suspect in the investigation of the disappearance of Madeleine McCann has been released to the public by detectives. Police have issued two EFITs that they believe are descriptions of the same man who is now being sought as a priority by the British detectives leading the new McCann inquiry. He was seen in the vicinity of the Praia da Luz resort in Portugal 6 years ago at the time the 3-year-old went missing. Despite numerous appeals for information over the years, the man has not come forward to talk to investigators in Portugal or Britain. Descriptions of the suspect were given to the Portuguese inquiry by two witnesses after Madeleine disappeared. It is only now, after Metropolitan Police detectives cross-referenced all the information gathered by Portuguese detectives, private investigators, and mobile phone data from the resort, that the significance of the witness statements has been fully understood. In an appeal to be broadcast on Monday night on BBC One's Crime Watch, Detective Chief Inspector Andy Redwood of the Metropolitan Police will call for anyone who recognizes the man to contact him immediately. The EFITs are clear, and I would ask the public to look very carefully at them, Redwood said. If you know who this person is, please come forward. Whilst this man may or may not be the key to unlocking this investigation, tracing and speaking to him is of vital importance to us. We have witnesses placing him in the resort area around the time of Madeleine's disappearance. The significance of the man has come to light as detectives have analyzed tens of thousands of documents from the original investigations and mobile phone footprints in the resort on the night the child went missing. Redwood said, our work to date has significantly changed the timeline and the accepted versions of events that has been in the public domain to date. The inquiry is focusing on 41 suspects, not persons of interest, suspects, and requests for assistance have been issued to 30 countries in a bid to identify and eliminate these people, 15 of whom are British. Crime Watch will feature other EFITs of individuals that the police would also like to trace. But it is this man in particular who detectives are very keen on finding. The man was described by the two witnesses as being inside the Ocean Club complex in Praia da Luz area on the evening that Madeleine went missing from the apartment. Redwood will travel to Germany, the Netherlands, and Ireland to repeat his appeal as detectives from the British investigation attempt to close in on the man. He was described by the witnesses as white, aged between 20 and 40, with short brown hair of medium build, medium height, and clean-shaven. Very nondescript description. Redwood will outline the new theory of what happened on Crime Watch on Monday in a 25-minute reconstruction, which he said amounted to the most detailed narrative yet of what happened. The film shows the couple leaving the apartment 5A where their three children, Madeleine, then 3, and twins Sean and Amalie, 18 months, slept inside and sitting down with their friends at a poolside table in a tapas bar a few hundred yards away. At 8:30 p.m., Kate and Jerry McCann went for dinner with 7 friends, leaving the children, who were checked on at least twice, according to Kate McCann's autobiography. What does at least twice mean? I mean, she can't remember if it was 2 or 3 times? The McCann's friend, Jane Tanner, has also said that at about 9:15 p.m., she saw a man carrying a small child walking away from apartment 5A. Wait, and she didn't say anything to anybody? What? That man has never been traced. At 10 p.m., Redwood said Madeleine's mother found the child gone when she checked the apartment. I guess if he was carrying the small child, she thought he was the father, and she didn't think it had anything to do with anything. I don't know. Okay. At 10 p.m., Redwood said Madeleine's mother found the child gone when she checked the apartment. By putting these 90 minutes under intense scrutiny, Redwood's team have established new theories about the events and exactly when Madeleine was abducted. Kate McCann has said, "We are not the ones that have done something wrong here. It's the person who has gone into that apartment and taken a little girl away from her family." Redwood said, "Through meticulous drawing together specific information, the team has been able to refocus the timeline and now places more significance on events that night. The timeline we have now established has given new significance to sightings and movements of people in and around Praia da Luz at the time of Madeleine's disappearance. I hope when the public sees our investigative strands drawn together with the overall context of that appeal, it will bring new information that moves our investigation forward." All right, so a couple of timeline points here. After May 3rd, 2007, on June 17th, Chief Inspector Olegario Sosa admits vital forensic clues may have been destroyed in the hours after Madeleine's disappearance as the scene was not protected properly. August 11, exactly 100 days after Madeleine disappeared, investigating officers publicly acknowledged for the first time that she could be dead. April 28, 2010, near the third anniversary of Madeleine's disappearance, Jerry McCann says it is incredibly frustrating that police in Portugal and the UK had not been actively looking for Madeleine for a very long time. May 12th, 2011, in an open letter in the Sun newspaper, the McCanns asked the Prime Minister to launch an independent, transparent, and comprehensive review of all information relating to the disappearance of their daughter. David Cameron wrote to the McCanns telling them the Home Secretary will set out new action on May 13th, 2011, the next day after this open letter. July 4th, 2013, the Met said it has new evidence. It says it is investigating 38 persons of interest after launching a formal investigation. Interesting how at that time they were called persons of interest. October 14th, detectives release an e-fit of a man they want to identify. This is a new reconstruction on Crime Watch. All right. So, again, someone expertly versed in how they do investigations in Portugal can explain why they wrote off all this information about all these potential suspects, witnesses, all these things. Or did they not? Did they really follow up on all of them and were able to rule them out somehow? All right, let's go back to the overview. Shortly after the e-fit images were released by Scotland Yard in 2013, Portugal police reopened their inquiry. That's interesting. If they were that is very interesting. If they were that satisfied in the competency of their original investigation, would they reopen? I don't know. Operation Grange was scaled back in 2015, but the remaining detectives continued to pursue a small number of inquiries described in April 2017 as significant. In June 2020, the police in the German city Braunschweig announced that they suspect a 43-year-old convicted sexual predator who they identified only as Christian B, due to Germany's privacy laws, as being responsible for McCann's disappearance. The suspect was later identified as Christian Brookner in several publications. The disappearance attracted sustained international interest and saturation coverage in the UK, reminiscent of the death of Diana in 1997. And Princess Diana's tragic death has also been requested to be covered. There's many conspiracy theories surrounding that, which I will be doing an episode on that in the future as well. All right, the McCanns were subjected to intense scrutiny and baseless allegations of involvement in their daughter's death, particularly in the tabloid press and on Twitter. In 2008, they and their traveling companions received damages and apologies from Express newspapers. And in 2011, the McCanns testified before the Leveson inquiry into British press misconduct, lending support to those arguing for tighter press regulation. All right, so let's go over the individuals involved here. Madeleine McCann, born in Leicester and lived with her family in Rothley, also in Leicestershire. At her parents' request, she was made a ward of court in England shortly after the disappearance, which gave the court statutory powers to act on her behalf. So for those that are not British, a ward in law is someone placed under the protection of a legal guardian. The wardship jurisdiction is an ancient jurisdiction derived from the crown's duty as parens patriae, parent of the nation or parent of the fatherland, to protect his or her subject, particularly those unable to look after themselves. In the UK and other Commonwealth realms, The queen, as parens petrae, is mother for all the children in her realms. A court may take responsibility for the legal protection of an individual, usually either a child or incapacitated person, in which the ward is known as a ward of the court or ward of the state. Okay, police described Madeleine as a blonde-haired with blue eyes, a small brown spot on her left calf, and a distinctive dark strip on the iris of her right eye. Now, you would think with this unusual description, I mean, I don't know what percentage of the population has a distinctive dark strip on the iris of their right eye and also a brown spot on the left calf. I mean, those are easy to identify marks, unlike a lot of children who go missing that don't have those and can blend in a little bit more easily. In 2009, the McCanns released age-processed images of how she may have looked at age 6, and in 2012, Scotland Yard commissioned one of her at age 9. All right, Kate and Jerry McCann, Madeleine's parents, are both physicians and practicing Roman Catholics. Kate Marie McCann, born 1968 near Liverpool in Huyton, attended All Saints School in Anfield, then Notre Dame High School in Everton Valley, graduating in 92 with a degree in medicine from the University of Dundee. She moved briefly into obstetrics and gynecology, then anesthetics, and finally general practice. Gerald Patrick McCann, born 1968 in Glasgow, attended Holyrood RC Secondary School before graduating from the University of Glasgow with a BSc in Physiology Sports Science in 89. In 92, he qualified in medicine, and in 2002, obtained his MD, also from Glasgow. Since 2005, he has been a consultant cardiologist at Glenfield Hospital in Leicester. The McCanns met in 93 in Glasgow and were married in 98. Madeleine was born in 2003, and the twins, a boy and a girl, in 2005. The Tapas 7. The McCanns were on holiday with 7 friends, 8 children in all, including the McCanns 3. The 9 adults dined together most evenings at 8:30 in the resort's tapas restaurant, as a result of which the media dubbed the friends the Tapas 7. The Tapas 7 included Fiona and David Payne, both physicians, their 2 children, and Fiona's mother, Diane Webster. The McCanns had known the Paynes for years. Kate had met Fiona in 2000 when they both worked in Leicester General Hospital's intensive care unit. Accompanying them were 2 couples the Paynes had originally introduced into the McCanns, Jane Tanner, a marketing manager, and her partner Russell O'Brien, a physician, who were on holiday with their 2 children, and Matthew Oldfield, another physician who was with his wife Rachel Oldfield, a lawyer, and their daughter. Jerry, Russell, and Matthew had worked together over the years. The Tanner sighting is Jane Tanner's report that she saw a man carrying a child away from the resort 45 minutes before Madeleine was reported missing, and this is one of the most discussed aspects of the case. Now, here's what jumps out at me immediately. Now, maybe I've just seen too many movies, but is it possible that these friends, or one or two, or one of the friends, or just one of the couples, or maybe all of them, if they're involved in some kind of illegal enterprise, anything from satanic, occult rings, child sacrifice rings, to just, I don't know, black market organ harvesting for children. I mean, that's dark. That's really, really dark. But are there people out there whose children need some kind of an organ transplant and they can't get it, and they need to get them from other children and not adults? Who knows? But there's some dark people in the world. There's a lot of darkness in the world. And did they kind of hatch this plot? Because if they're out to dinner, especially after having been out to dinner many times, they kind of have a set routine. Could they have somehow planned for the abduction of Madeleine, particularly if Madeleine was a perfect fit for some kind of client they had in mind for this? They would have, if that's true, then there's motive, means, and opportunity, and she might have even made up this story about the man running with the child. Particularly, let's say it was a female who abducted the child, then making up a story about the man or the child. I mean, if other people saw him, obviously we'll be getting into that sighting, and even if that was a real sighting, then they can appear like they're trying to aid the investigation, or maybe they didn't know it was going to happen that night. I don't know. It's just, yeah, people that have seen a lot of horror movies a lot of really dark dramas. They might think that friends of the McCanns might have set them up. And dark thought, I know, but that just jumped out at me, and I'm sure they've been thoroughly investigated, so that's probably not the case. But that just jumped out at me as a theoretical possibility in just seeing how all these variables stack up. So let's move on to the apartment. The McCanns arrived Saturday, April 28th, 2007 for their 7-night spring break in Praia da Luz, a village with a population of 1,000, known as Little Britain because of the concentration of British homeowners and holiday makers. They had booked through the British holiday company, Mark Warner Limited, and were placed in 5A Rua Dr. Agostinho da Silva, an apartment owned by a retired teacher from Liverpool, one of severally private-owned properties rented by the company. 5A was a 2-bedroom ground-floor apartment in the 5th block of a group of apartments known as Waterside Village, which lay on the perimeter of part of Mark Warner's Ocean Club Resort. Matthew and Rachel Oldfield were next door in 5B, Jane Tanner and Russell O'Brien in 5D, and the Paynes and Diane Webster on the first floor. Located on the corner of Rua Dr. Agostinho da Silva and Rua Dr. Francisco Gentle Martins, 5A was accessible to the public from 2 sides. Sliding glass patio doors in the living room at the back overlooked the Ocean Club's pool, tennis courts, tapas, restaurant, and bar. The patio doors could be accessed via a public street. Rua Dr. Francisco Gentle Martins, where a small gate and a set of steps led to 5A's balcony and living room. 5A's front door was on the opposite side of the block from the Ocean Club on Rua Dr. Agostinho da Silva. The McCanns' children slept in a bedroom next to the front door, which the McCanns kept locked. The bedroom had one waist-high window with curtains and a metal exterior shutter, the latter controlled by a cord inside the window. The McCanns kept the curtains and shutter closed throughout the holiday. The window overlooked a narrow walkway and residence car park, which was separated from the street by a low wall. Madeleine slept in a single bed next to the bedroom door on the opposite side of the room from the window, while the twins were in travel cots in the middle of the room. There was another single bed underneath the window. Okay, so let's go through the tapas restaurant. This is 8:30, Thursday, May 3rd, was the penultimate day of the family's holiday. Over breakfast, Madeleine asked, "Why don't you come when her brother and I cried," when she's talking about her brother here, "and I cried last night." After the disappearance, her parents wondered whether this meant someone had entered the children's bedroom. Her mother also noticed a large brown stain on Madeleine's pajama top. That is a bit bizarre. The children spent the morning in the resort's kids club, then the family lunched at their apartment before heading to the pool. Kate took the last known photograph of Madeleine at 2:29 that afternoon, sitting by the pool next to her father and 2-year-old sister. The children returned to kids club, then at 6, their mother took them back to 5A, while their father went for a tennis lesson. The McCanns put the children to bed around 7. Madeleine was left asleep in short-sleeved pink and white Mark and Spencer's Eeyore pajamas next to her comfort blanket and a soft toy cuddle cat. At 8:30, the parents left 5A to dine with their friends in the Ocean Club's open-air tapas restaurant located on the other side of the pool. 5A lay about 55 meters or 160 feet from the restaurant as the crow flies, but getting to the restaurant involved walking along a public street to reach the doors of the Ocean Club Resort, then walking through the resort to the other side of the pool, a distance of 82 meters or 295 feet. The top of the apartment was visible from the tapas restaurant, but not the doors. The patio doors could be locked only from the inside, so the McCanns left them closed but unlocked, with the curtains drawn so they could let themselves in that way when checking on the children. There was a child safety gate at the top of the steps from the patio and a low gate at the bottom, which led to the street. The resort staff had left a note in a message book at the swimming pool reception area asking the same table, which overlooked the apartments, be block booked for 8:30 for the McCanns and friends every evening for the last 4 evenings of the holiday. The message said the group's children were asleep in the apartments. Madeleine's mother believes the abductor may have seen the note. And on another sinister note about the note, it's how often is there an insider at a resort or a hotel or restaurant, some kind of establishment that might be connected with elements of crime, with criminals and traffickers, that they keep an eye on these things, so they give the tip off to these criminals on what are good targets that would cause the least amount of trouble and be the easiest. So yeah, that's an interesting piece of evidence there that definitely should have been followed up on and all employees checked out. Is that what they did initially? We'll find out how much we can get on all of these individuals, how much information. The McCanns and their friends left the restaurant roughly every half hour to check on their children. Madeleine's father carried out the first check on 5A at around 9:05. The children were asleep and all was well, except that he recalled having left the children's bedroom slightly ajar, and now it stood almost wide open. He pulled it nearly closed again before returning to the restaurant. Oh man, this is really creepy, because is it possible the perpetrator could have already been in the room at the time and he either hid or moved back, or... Yeah, that's really, really creepy, unless that was just some kind of draft or his memory was imperfect. But yeah, that's rough. All right, so 9:15, the Tanner sighting. The sighting by Jane Tanner, one of the Tappas 7, of a man carrying a child that night became an important part of the early investigation. She had left the restaurant just after 9 to check on her own daughter, passing Madeleine's father on Rua Dr. Francisco Gentle Martins on his way back to the restaurant from his 9:05 check. He had stopped to chat to a British holidaymaker, but neither man recalled having seen Tanner. This puzzled the Portuguese police, given how narrow the street was, and led them to accuse Tanner of having invented the sighting. Tanner told police that around 9:15, she had noticed a man carrying a young child, walk across the junction of Rua Dr. Francisco Gentle Martins and Rua Dr. Agostino da Silva just ahead of her. He was not far from Madeleine's bedroom, heading east away from the front of the apartment, 5A. In the early days of the investigation, the direction in which he was walking was thought to be important because he was moving toward the home of Robert Murat, the 33-year-old British-Portuguese man who lived near apartment 5A and who became the case's first suspect. The child in the man's arms was wearing light-colored pink pajamas and with a floral pattern and cuffs on the legs, similar to Madeleine's. Now, I don't know how much that means, because are those cuff-type pink pajamas... I mean... Again, the whole thing is kind of rough. Tanner described the man as white, dark-haired, 5'7", tall, Southern European or Mediterranean appearance, 35 to 40 years old, wearing gold or beige trousers and a dark jacket, and said he did not look like a tourist. Tanner told the Portuguese police, but they did not pass the description to the media until May 25th. That's pretty terrible. That's a lot of lost time if this sighting is legitimate. Madeleine's fund hired a forensic artist to create an image of the man, which was released in October 2007. Scotland Yard believe it was an uninvolved British tourist carrying his own daughter. How did they come to that determination? Because if they never found and interviewed the guy and saw his daughter and those pajamas or similar pajamas... The sighting became important because it offered investigators a time frame for the abduction, but Scotland Yard came to view it as a red herring. In October, 2013, they said that a British holidaymaker had been identified as the man Tanner had seen. He had been returning to his apartment after collecting his daughter from the Ocean Club night creche, which is a night nursery. It took them that many years, October 2013, or are they just referring, and if this was only found out in 2013, all these years after, that's really bizarre. Or did they know the whole time, in which case, why didn't they release that information? Scotland Yard took photographs of the man wearing the same or similar clothes to the ones he was wearing on the night and standing in a pose similar to the one Tanner reported. The pajamas his daughter had been wearing also matched Tanner's report. Operation Grange lead detective DCI Andy Redwood said they were almost certain the Tanner sighting was not related to the abduction. So if this is all true and they identified this man, but why did it take so long? Really bizarre. All right, let's move on to 10 o'clock and the Smith sighting. The rejection of the Tanner sighting as crucial to the timeline allowed investigators to focus on another sighting of a man carrying a child that night. Now, how incompetent are investigators if they can't focus on more than one lead? I can't even believe I'm reading this. You don't have to reject the Tanner sighting to explore other leads as well, because if you don't know what happened and the case is unsolved, why are you waiting to reject one lead before focusing on another lead? Especially if there's more than one officer, more than one investigator involved in this case. Suppose this is this huge case, they can't follow more than lead at once, and it's taken all these years to clear leads. This is really bizarre. Is this another case of just a completely botched and bungled investigation? And as we continue through all of the information available on the case, including the new suspect, we will find out. So this other sighting was reported to the Portuguese police on May 26, 2007, so quite a few weeks later, by Martin and Mary Smith, who had been in Praia da Luz on holiday from Ireland. Scotland Yard concluded in 2013 that the Smith sighting offered the approximate time of Madeleine's kidnap. The Smiths saw the man at around 10 o'clock on Rua de Escola Primaria, 500 yards or 460 meters from the McCann's apartment, walking away from the Ocean Club and toward Rua 25 de Abril and the beach. He was carrying a girl aged 3 to 4. She had blonde hair, pale skin, wearing light-colored pajamas, and had bare feet. The man was mid-30s, 5'7 to 5'9", slim to normal build, with short brown hair, wearing cream or beige trousers. He did not look like a tourist, according to the Smiths, and had seemed uncomfortable carrying the child. E-fits based on Smith's testimony were first created in 2008 by Oakley International, private investigators hired by the McCanns, and were publicized in 2013 by Scotland Yard on Crime Watch. That's also bizarre to me, because if they knew this information and they had these e-fits based on the Smith's testimony in 2008, which is already kind of late, but they just held them for 5 years, for half a decade, they were prevented from going public with it, or for whatever reason chose not to go public, that's really, really bizarre. All right, 10 o'clock reported missing. Madeleine's mother had intended to check on the children at 9:30, but Matthew Oldfield, one of the Tapas 7, offered to do it when he checked on his own children in the apartment next to 5A. He noticed that the McCann's children's bedroom door was wide open, but after hearing no noise, he left 5A without looking far enough into the bedroom to see whether Madeleine was there. He could not recall whether the bedroom window and its exterior shutter were open at this point. Early on in the investigation, the Portuguese police accused Oldfield of involvement because he had volunteered to do the check, suggesting to him that he had handed Madeleine to someone through the bedroom window. That's kind of bizarre, though, because what if they declined his offer? I don't know, that doesn't seem real bulletproof evidence against him, but yeah, the whole thing doesn't make any sense, but this, again, we see this incompetence all the time. You're not going to actually check on the kid. Like, what's the point of checking on the kids if you're not actually checking on the kids? It's kind of bizarre. Kate made her own check of 5A at around 10. Scotland Yard said in 2013 that Madeleine was probably taken moments before this. Kate recalled entering the apartment through the unlocked patio doors at the back and noticing that the children's bedroom door was wide open. When she tried to close the door, it slammed shut as though there was a draft, which is when she saw that the bedroom window and its shutter were open. Madeleine's cuddle cat and pink blanket were still on the bed, but Madeleine was gone. After briefly searching the apartment, Kate ran backwards toward the restaurant, screaming, "Madeleine's gone. Someone's taken her." Around 10:10, Madeleine's father sent Matthew Oldfield to ask the resort's reception desk to call the police, and at 10:30, the resort activated its missing child search protocol. It's an interesting gap there, however. 60 staff and guests searched until 4:30, at first assuming that Madeleine had wandered off. One of them told Channel 4's dispatches that from one end of Luz to the other, you could hear people calling her name. Early response, the Portuguese police, 2 officers from the Gendarmerie, the Guarda Nacional Republicana, arrived at the resort at 11:10 from Lagos, 5 miles away. At midnight, after briefly searching, they alerted the criminal police, the Polícia Judiciária, in nearby Portimão. Kate McCann said the PJ arrived just after 1. According to the PJ, they arrived within 10 minutes of being alerted. At 2 patrol dogs were brought to the resort, and at 8, 4 search and rescue dogs. Police officers had their leave canceled and started searching waterways, wells, caves, sewers, and ruins. Inspector Gonçalo Amaral, head of the PJ in Portimão, became the inquiry's coordinator. It was widely acknowledged that mistakes were made during the so-called golden hours soon after the disappearance. Neither border nor marine police were given descriptions of Madeleine for many hours, and officers did not make house-to-house searches. According to Kate, roadblocks were first put in place at 10 the next morning. Police did not request motorway surveillance pictures of vehicles leaving Praia da Luz the night of the disappearance, or the road between Lagos and Vila Real de Santo Antonio on the Spanish border. Euroscut, the company that monitors the road, said they were not approached for information. It took Interpol 5 days to issue a global missing person alert. Whoa. 5 days is a long time. And this isn't like the 70s or the 80s or the 90s when information is slow to move. It's bizarre. It's bizarre. Not everyone in the resort at the time was interviewed. Holidaymakers later contacted the British police to say no one had spoken to them. The crime scene was not secured. Police took samples from Madeleine's bedroom, which were sent to 3 forensic labs in Portugal. It was reported June 1st, 2007, that DNA from one stranger had been found, but around 20 people had entered the apartment 5A before it was closed off, according to Chief Inspector Olegario de Sousa of the PJ. According to Madeleine's mother, an officer placed tape across the doorway of the children's bedroom, but left at 3 without securing the apartment. The PJ case file, released in 2008, showed that 5A lay empty for a month after the disappearance, then was let out to tourists before being sealed off in August 2007 for more forensic tests. A similar situation arose outside the apartment. A crowd gathered by the front door of 5A, including next to the children's bedroom window, through which an abductor may have entered or left, trampling on evidence. An officer dusted the window's exterior shutter for fingerprints without wearing gloves or other protective clothing. British police. In the UK, it was agreed that Madeleine's home force, Leicestershire Police, led by Chief Constable Matt Baggett, would coordinate the British response, although it remained a Portuguese inquiry. A strategic coordinating group, or GOLD group, was put together representing Leicestershire Police, the Serious Organised Crime Agency, the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre, and the National Police Improvement Agency. The PJ gave a team from the UK a room in which to work, but apparently resented their presence. The British police were used to feeding their data into Homes 2, the Home Office Large Major Inquiry System. In Portugal, the information was collected in boxes. In addition, the PJ had less autonomy than police in the UK, often having to wait for magistrates' decisions, which slowed things down. In an interview for Anthony Summers and Robin Swan's book Looking for Madeleine in 2014, Jim Gamble, head of the CEOP at the time, said the Portuguese police felt they were being condescended to, and the British were acting as a colonial power. Kind of weird how people's egos can't even be set aside to help find a child. It's just bizarre. Human psychology always at play at all times. Media and PR. A PJ officer acknowledged in 2010 that the Portuguese police had been suspicious of the McCanns from the start because of the media circus. Jerry McCann told Vanity Fair in 2008 that he had decided to market Madeleine to keep her in the public eye. To that end, a string of public relations people arrived in Praia da Luz, deeply resented by the local police, who saw the media attention as counterproductive. Alex Woolfall of the British PR firm Bell Pottinger, representing Mark Warner Limited, dealt with the media for the first 10 days, then the British government sent in press officers. This was apparently unprecedented. The first government press officer was Sherry Dodd, a former Daily Mirror journalist who was followed by Clarence Mitchell, Director of Media Monitoring for the Central Office of Information. When the government withdrew Mitchell, the McCanns hired Justine McGuinness, who was reportedly headhunted for the job. When she left, Hanover Communications took over briefly, headed by Charles Lewington, formerly John Major's private secretary. In September 2007, Brian Kennedy of Everest Windows stepped forward as a benefactor and offered to cover Clarence Mitchell's salary so that he could return. Mitchell resigned from his government position and started working for the McCanns full-time. He was later paid by Madeleine's fund. The McCanns set up Madeleine's fund, Leave No Stone Unturned Limited, on May 15, 2007 to raise money and awareness. Its website attracted 58 million hits in the first 2 days. Throughout May and June, the couple's PR team arranged events to give reporters a news peg. There was a visit to the Portuguese city of Fatima, where 3 children had reported a Marian apparition in 1917, as well as trips to Holland, Germany, Spain, and Morocco. On May 30th, 2007, accompanied by reporters, the couple flew to Rome in Sir Philip Green's Learjet to meet Pope Benedict XVI. A visit arranged by Cardinal Cormac Murphy O'Connor, the Archbishop of Westminster. The following month, balloons were let off in 300 cities around the world. By early June, journalists were voicing concerns. The sheer professionalism of it troubled journalists, according to Matthew Paris. Placing Madeleine on the front page of a British newspaper would sell up to 30,000 extra copies. She appeared on the cover of People magazine May 28, 2007, on the front page of several British tabloids every day for almost 6 months, and as one of Sky News' menu options, UK News, Madeleine, World News. Between May 2007 and July 2008, the Portuguese tabloid Correio de Mana published 384 articles about her. By June 2008, a search for her name on YouTube returned over 3,680 videos and 7 million posts. So, obviously, this is a very, very the media presence was very, very heavy. All right, let's look at the first Portuguese inquiry. So this was 2007 through 2008. 12 days after the disappearance, Robert Murat, a 34-year-old British-Portuguese property consultant, became the first arguido. Born in Hammersmith, West London, Murat lived in his mother's house, Casa Liliana, 150 yards, 137 meters, from apartment 5A, in the direction of which the man in the Tanner sighting had walked. He was made an arguido after a Sunday Mirror journalist told police he had been asking about the case. The PJ had briefly signed him up as an official interpreter. He said he wanted to help because he had a daughter in England around Madeleine's age. He was asking about the case, and he was briefly signed up as an official interpreter. Is this a case of a criminal wanting to be involved in the case? Is this more akin to some kind of serial killer acting alone who wants to be involved? Or because somebody part of some... or maybe he could be an agent working as part of some trafficking ring and he wants to keep inside tabs on the investigation to make sure it stays cold, perhaps? A lot of possibilities there. 3 members of the Tapas 7 Fiona Payne, Russell O'Brien, and Rachel Oldfield said they had seen Murat outside apartment 5A shortly after the disappearance, as did an Ocean Club nanny and 2 British holidaymakers. This would not have been surprising considering how close Murat lived to 5A, but he and his mother said he had been home all evening. Now, this is of course very curious, but as we see in many cases, either people want to avoid suspicion or they're covering up other illicit and or criminal activity they don't want found out about, and they're not necessarily responsible for this particular crime. Because just because someone is acting shady, that doesn't mean a particular crime that they're accused of being involved with is the only possible crime they could have been involved in on that particular time period in question. Particularly if certain individuals are into drugs or other things, they're constantly going up and around, up and about, and they're not going to admit their other shady illegal dealings. So they're going to make up a false alibi, but it's not necessarily because they were involved in a murder or a disappearance or whatever was in question that makes them look shady. So again, black and white fallacies, we have to avoid falling for them. The McCann circle was clearly suspicious of Murat. One of the McCann supporters offered Richard Bilton, a BBC reporter, exclusive access to any new developments in the case if Bilton would report back what the press pack was saying about Murat. Beginning on May 15, 2007, Murat's home was searched, the pool drained, his cars, computers, phones, and videotapes examined, his garden searched using ground radar and sniffer dogs, and 2 of his associates questioned. In March 2008, one of those associates had his car set fire to with the word "Fala," speak, sprayed in red on the pavement. All right, so clearly there was some investigation done here. Because if they thoroughly investigated this guy, is this guy good enough to commit this crime? And would he even commit the crime if he's that close to that apartment? It seems kind of unlikely. I don't know. Do perpetrators, either opportunists or experienced serial killers, would they strike so close to where they live? I mean, obviously there's a certain familiarity with it. You can go all the way back to the Jack the Ripper's murders, and if you haven't checked out the incredibly comprehensive Jack the Ripper podcast series on Mindshock, we do have more episodes coming in that one. There's over 100 suspects of which we will be looking at. Some theorize that it was a local living directly in the neighborhood, and that would have certain advantages of being able to slip away through back alleys unnoticed, as opposed to a serial killer from elsewhere coming in to strike and then leaving, who might possibly be more out of place and harder to move around. So, and again, if it is a local who other locals know, if he's wearing a disguise, then he just takes off the disguise and he's like, "Oh, hey there, neighbor." Whatever. There's certain advantages, obviously, criminals have operating in an area that's their home base and they're familiar with, but there's advantages and disadvantages. So it's, yeah. Or is it possible this guy only abducted and or harmed and or sold this one girl and then never did it before or since? I mean, I guess there's a certain percentage possibility, but we don't know. There was nothing to link Murat or his friends to the disappearance, and Murat's Arguido status was lifted July 21st, 2008, when the case was archived. Is this also a case of no good deed goes unpunished? What if he really was just a local trying to be helpful? I don't know. It depends. Like, how often did he work? If he was sort of like a busybody type individual who didn't have a whole lot of work, not a lot to do, and he was trying to make himself useful, I mean, that's a possibility as well. We can't discount that either. In April 2008, he received £600,000 in out-of-court settlements for libel in what the Observer said was the largest number of separate libel actions brought in the UK by the same person in relation to one issue. His friends received £100,000 each. You know what else is bizarre? Is it possible that this guy is kind of a shady, opportunist, sketchy individual who knew that he would be looked at as a suspect? Now, if he was obviously 100% 100% innocent, would he interject into the case to make himself look guilty with it pre-planned that the libel would ensue, or at least a high probability, and he would get some kind of a settlement by making himself look suspicious? Maybe even by lying about his whereabouts. Like, let's say he was out for a walk, or, I mean, again, you'd have to examine his normal actions. If he takes a walk every night in roughly the same area as this apartment and all these other areas, and then he intentionally lied saying he was home to make himself look suspicious, and then he was trying to interject himself into the case. Is that a strategy certain people use to sue tabloid newspapers? I mean, obviously, I don't think it's a widespread strategy, but did this particular individual hatch this forward-thinking 3D chess plot and then take advantage of it? And obviously, that would mean he'd be innocent. Otherwise, he probably wouldn't do that. So, many different things to ponder and explore without falling for fallacies, exploring every variable here, because this is obviously a very bizarre case. In July 2014, during Operation Grange, one of those friends was questioned again as a witness, this time by the PJ on behalf of Scotland Yard. In December that year, Murat and his wife were questioned, also on behalf of Scotland Yard, along with 8 others. So this does seem like they're actually doing a real investigation here. In 2017, Murat's mother, Jenny Murat, added her voice to those who had witnessed suspicious events around 5A that night. She told the BBC that she had driven past the apartment 5A that night and had seen a young woman in a plum-colored top behaving suspiciously just outside it. Information she said she had passed to the police at the time. She also said she had seen a small brown rental car speeding toward the apartment, driving the wrong way down a one-way street. All right, it's Mindshock time. This is a detail, I know some people are familiar with it, but I don't know if it gets enough attention. Because first of all, are they changing their stories? Because his mother originally said that she and him were home that night. Or is this a case of them wanting to, is this all part of the libel plot? Trying to get more money by making up stories to appear guilty when they know they're not guilty. They know they can't be convicted because they didn't do it, and no evidence would ever exist because they didn't do it. So would they toy with police? And obviously it is a crime. You can't just, interfere with an investigation like that, giving them false leads, especially taking time and resources away from a real investigation. But I don't know if these are deranged individuals. I'm not alleging they are or they aren't. I'm just trying to explore every possibility. Or she's telling the truth. Or they really are involved and they're making up stories to divert attention from themselves. But it just seems unlikely given their proximity. Because if this was a normal thing where they're stealing children constantly, which we will explore possibilities and individuals regarding that theory. But shouldn't this have been more investigated originally? Because we're looking at 2017 here during the Scotland Yard investigation. What is going on? 10 years after, and for this information to become public? I mean, this is important information. If she had, it doesn't say at what point. She said she passed it to the police at the time. So the young woman in a plum-colored top behaving suspiciously outside 5A, and the speeding vehicle going a small brown rental car speeding towards the apartment the wrong way down a one-way street. So if this information was given that night, we don't know when. It doesn't state here at what point she claimed she told the police originally. They possibly could have had a lot more leads that night and been moving a lot quicker. 10 years. All right. Witness statements. In statements to the PJ, witnesses described men behaving oddly near apartment 5A in the days before the disappearance and on the day itself. Scotland Yard came to believe that these men may have been engaged in reconnaissance for an abduction or burglary. And of course, it's very, very creepy when when the McCanns mentioned Madeleine saying why they didn't come into her room when when she was crying. And I guess there was no further info there, but were they actually in the room that night as well? It's just really, really creepy and disturbing to think of some of these possibilities. There had been a 4-fold increase in burglaries between January and May 2007. Is that too coincidental? A 4-fold, 4 times the burglary increase. including 2 in the McCann's block in the 17 days before the disappearance, during which burglars had entered through windows. Several witnesses reported men collecting for charity. On April 20th, a bedraggled-looking man asked a tourist in her apartment near 5A for money for an orphanage in nearby Espich. Apparently, there were no orphanages or similar in or near Espich at the time. The witness described the man as pushy and intimidating. On the 25th or 26th of April, the tourist who rented apartment 5A before the McCanns found a man on his balcony who had entered via the steps from the street. Polite and clean-shaven, the visitor asked for money for an orphanage. On the day of this disappearance, May 3rd, there were 4 charity collections by 2 men in the streets around 5A. At 4 p.m., 2 black-haired men approached a British homeowner looking for funds for a hostel or hospice in or near Espich. And at 5 p.m., 2 men approached another British tourist with a similar story. Now, this is a lot of shady activity going on around 5A in the days and weeks prior to the abduction or disappearance. An ugly blonde-haired man was seen on May 2nd across the road from 5A. I mean, describe the man. He was an ugly guy. He was an ugly blonde-haired guy. Can you imagine seeing that on the police report? Authorities are looking for an ugly blonde man. That's bizarre. But anyway, an ugly blonde-haired man was seen on May 2nd across the road from 5A, apparently watching it. He had also been seen on April 29th near the Ocean Club. On April 30th, the granddaughter of 5A's former owners saw a blonde-haired man leaning against a wall behind the apartments and saw him again on May 2nd near the tapas restaurant looking at 5A. You know what's really bizarre? All these witnesses are specifically saying he's looking at 5A or in the direction of 5A. It's a bit bizarre. She described him as Caucasian, mid-30s, short-cropped hair, and ugly with spots. So all these different people are describing this as just a really ugly individual. On the day of the disappearance or the day before, a man was seen staring at the McCann's block where a white van was parked. All right, so there seems to be a clear distinction between witnesses saying he was looking at 5A and he was looking at the McCann's block, the entire block. Now we have a white van, a parked white van. In the late afternoon, May 3rd, a girl on the balcony of the apartment above 5A saw a man leave through the gate below as he had come out of a ground floor apartment. What caught her attention was that he looked around before shutting the gate quietly with both hands. That's creepy. At 2:30 p.m., 2 blonde-haired men were seen on the balcony of 5C, an empty apartment 2 doors from 5A. Between 4 and 5 p.m., a blonde-haired man was seen near 5A. At 6, the same or another blonde-haired man was seen in the stairwell of the McCann's block. At 11 p.m., after the disappearance, 2 blonde-haired men were seen in a nearby street speaking in raised voices. When they realized they had been noticed, they reportedly lowered their voices and walked away. All right, very creepy, mind-shocking material here. Is it possible there's this ring of burglars, because obviously we had a 4-fold increase in burglary activity in the months leading up to the disappearance? So it would also be curious to see what the burglary rate was after the disappearance for how many months, or if they all stopped. But what jumps out at me here, just going through different theoretical possibilities, is it possible this was a burglary ring and this was the one time they decided to also do an abduction because maybe one of the members of the burglary ring has another shady criminal friend who said that children would yield a lot of money on the black market. Maybe there was some disagreement within the burglary ring. Maybe these were thieves with honor, and they believed only in stealing possessions and not human beings. And maybe some of them were in agreement, some of them weren't. What were they arguing about? That jumped out at me as one possibility. Obviously, there are many. This could be a completely unrelated burglary ring. Perhaps the burglars were in the middle of burglarizing an apartment when the abduction was going on, and through all of this commotion, they were worried about being caught because there's other criminals doing other different criminal activity. So there's a lot of different variables, a lot of different possibilities of what was going down that night. But if all of these witnesses are specifically reporting ugly blonde guys staking out 5A specifically in the days leading up to the day of and the night of the disappearance, I mean, even the most hardcore coincidence theorist would have trouble writing that off. And the other thing that's bizarre, what is with this connection to these people raising money for orphanages that don't exist? I mean, this is also right out of a horror movie. Why are these people asking for money, some of which are pushy and intimidating, others of which are polite? Really bizarre. All right. Obviously, it's also possible that at 11 p.m. after the disappearance, two blonde-haired men were possibly arguing about a million different things. A cheating girlfriend, some drug thing, something not illegal at all, disagreements about where they want to go on vacation next. It could be a million different things. And being noticed and lowering voices and walking away, for civil people, is that what they would do? Because if they don't know about the disappearance, or maybe they do and they're arguing about something else, they don't want to cause trouble. I mean, obviously it doesn't necessarily mean anything. But all right, let's move on to the McCanns as arguidos. Early suspicion. The first indication that the media were turning against the McCanns was on June 6, 2007, when a German journalist asked them during a Berlin press conference whether they were involved in the disappearance. You know what's weird? What did that German journalist expect them to say? Like, even if they were involved. Oh, yeah, by the way, yeah, thanks for calling us on it. It's all a big sham. We can shut it down now. Arrest us now. Like, I mean, obviously he was looking for some kind of a reaction or a tell. And then to play off that, which, of course, we will be examining some body language interviews and all those things, which they're really difficult to judge because, let's say, I haven't floated this theory yet, but I'll throw it out there right now. This would be incredibly mind-shocking. Obviously, I don't believe this is true. There's not enough evidence, but just in terms of looking through all the different possibilities, if the McCanns, let's say, were involved in some kind of organ harvesting thing and they were offered a lot of money for their child or some kind of satanic occult, their lives threatened, so they know something, but they denied, and they didn't want her taken. They denied all involvement. They were completely innocent, but maybe they didn't report to authorities, or maybe they did and the authorities were corrupt and didn't listen to them and they were fearing for their lives. How would a couple react in that situation? Because they don't want their other twins taken. I mean, you got limited options if you're dealing with a certain amount of corruption and evil, where it's just difficult. Obviously, would they just pack up and leave and go to another country? It's all problematic because, especially if they know it's some kind of international high-level ring, they don't necessarily have a lot of recourse there. However, they might appear very deceptive with nervous twitches and stuff because they know a lot more than they said, but they're not responsible. So something in that capacity could explain certain things. But anyway, let's continue here. On June 30th, a 3,000-word article entitled "The Madeleine Case, A Pact of Silence" appeared in Sol, a Portuguese weekly, stating that the McCanns were suspects, highlighting alleged inconsistencies between their statements and implying that the Tanner sighting had been invented. The reports had obtained the Tapas 7's mobile numbers and that of another witness, so it was apparent that the inquiry had a leak. This and later articles in the Portuguese press, invariably followed up in the UK, made several allegations based on no evidence, which would engulf the McCanns for years on social media. They included that the McCanns and the Tapas 7 were swingers, that the McCanns had been sedating their children and that the group had formed a pact of silence regarding what had happened the night of the disappearance. Much was made of apparent inconsistencies within and between the McCanns and Tapas 7's statements. The police had asked the group questions in Portuguese, and an interpreter had translated the replies. According to Kate McCann, the statements were then typed up in Portuguese and verbally translated back into English for the interviewees to sign. Well, that is very problematic if that's the normal procedure. Wow. That cannot be the normal procedure. You know, another possibility, let's say they were swingers or drug traffickers, or let's say they were involved in something else illegal, but they weren't involved in the disappearance. They're not necessarily, why would they want all of their illegal dealings exposed if it had nothing to do, or they truly believe it had nothing to do with the disappearance? So that could also account for some inconsistencies without them being responsible. Among the inconsistencies was whether the McCanns had entered the apartment by the front or back door when checking on the children. According to the PJ case file, Jerry stated during his first interview on May 4th, 2007, that the couple had entered 5A through the locked front door for his 9:05 and her 10 o'clock checks, and in a second interview on May 10th, he had entered through the unlocked patio doors at the back. The patio doors could be unlocked only from the inside, so the parents had left them unlocked to let themselves in. There was also an inconsistency about whether the front door had been locked. Jerry told the Sunday Times in December 2007 that they had used the front door earlier in the week, but it was next to the children's bedroom, so they had started using the patio doors instead. The PJ also questioned why, when Kate discovered Madeleine was missing, she had run to the tapas restaurant, leaving the twins alone in 5A, when she could have used her cell phone or shouted to the group from the 5A's rear balcony. Well, and then the other thing, though, too, is if a mother has a missing child that she believes was harmed or abducted, not just wandered off, I mean, how much logic is available in a panicked mind? I mean, obviously every individual is different. Every individual reacts differently. And I don't know. It's hard to really quantify that definitively. Another issue was whether the exterior shutter over Madeleine's bedroom window could be opened from outside. According to journalist Danny Collins, the shutter was made of non-ferrous metal slats on a roller blind that was housed in a box at the top of the inside window, controlled by pulling on a strap. Once rolled down, the slats locked in place outside the window and could be raised only by using the strap on the inside. Kate said the shutter and window were closed when Madeleine was put to bed, but open when she discovered Madeleine was missing. Jerry told the PJ that when he was first alerted to the disappearance, he had lowered the shutter, then had gone outside and discovered that it could be raised only from the outside. Against this, police said that the shutter could only be raised from the outside without being forced, but there was no sign of forced entry. They also said forcing the shutter open would have caused a lot of noise. The apparent discrepancies contributed to the view of the PJ that there had been no abduction. Kate's shout of "they've taken her" was viewed with suspicion, as though she had been paving the way for an abduction story. Particularly from August onwards, these suspicions developed into the theory that Madeleine had died in apartment 5A as a result of an accident, perhaps after being sedated to help her stay asleep, and that her parents had hidden her body for a month before retrieving her and driving her to an unknown place in a car they had hired over 3 weeks after the disappearance. In 2010, Carlos Anjos, former head of the Police Detectives Union in Portugal, told BBC Panorama that most Portuguese investigators still believed Madeleine had died as a result of an accident in the apartment. You know what else is really, really bizarre? If the McCanns really were drugging the children because they believed they were having nightmares or whatever and cried a lot, what if those weren't nightmares? What if there really was some kind of an abduction ring or burglars who may or may not have been branching out into the abduction business? If that were true, obviously there would be a lot of shadiness surrounding the McCanns, because are they going to admit they were drugging their children? It's a bit bizarre. Also, where did they hide her for a whole month? Because the parents hid the body at what moments? Obviously, these are all things that need to be explored, but and then the other point, of course, if this was an accident and they were covering it up, what would they say and how would they act? So again, obviously the police need to examine all possibilities, but it's hard to completely dismiss it as an accidental death being covered up as an abduction, because that probably is how they would do it if they were doing that. Obviously, it doesn't mean they're doing that. Portugal sends a letter rogatory. On June 28, 2007, the McCann suggested to the PJ that the police request help from Daniel Krugel, a South African former police officer who had developed a matter orientation system, a handheld device that he claimed could locate missing people using DNA and satellites. On hearing about this years later, one scientist said it had caused his BS detector to go off the scale. Kate McCann wrote in 2011 that Krugel's claims made no sense, but the couple were desperate. In the second week of June, they sent him hair and eyelashes from Madeleine collected from the family home by relatives in the UK. Krugel arrived in Praia da Luz on July 15th and told the McCanns his equipment had picked up a static signal in an area of the beach near Rocha Negra Cliff. I wonder if this area was searched prior to this. The officer in charge of the PJ inquiry, Inspector Gonzalo Amaral, interpreted Kate's support of Krugel as a ploy. By this point, he believed the McCanns were involved in the disappearance, and Kate was using Krugel. She had also considered using psychics to, quote, disclose the location of her daughter's body, end quote, without compromising herself. How does that make any sense? What? Why would you want the location of the body disclosed in the first place if you were responsible? No body, no crime. It's weird. This is really what this inspector thought? Like, this is bringing more attention to her with all of these psychics and things. I mean, not if they're being used to disclose the location of a body. Obviously, some people believe psychics are real, certain percentage, and if you're desperate, you got nothing to lose, especially if the police aren't doing anything. I mean, desperate parents obviously would go to psychics. And I do have an episode coming up on psychics that actually solve cases, of which there are quite a few. A lot of people don't want to talk about that just because of the overwhelming amount of fraud psychics that some people fall for the black and white fallacy of saying that they're all frauds, which might be true or it might not be true. All right, anyway, with this in mind, the PJ sent a letter rogatory to the British police to ask for assistance in their search for Madeleine's body. In response, Mark Harrison, the National Search Advisor for the British National Policing Improvement Agency, arrived in Praia da Luz, walked around the search areas, and flew over them by helicopter. Describing Krugel's ideas as highly unlikely, Harrison's report, dated July 23, 2007, said that 100 officers had searched up to 9.3 miles around Praia da Luz, but that the officer in charge and most of the team had no training in search procedures, with the exception of a search and rescue team from Lisbon. Search dogs had been used, but after 5 days instead of within 2 days, as the handlers recommended. What the heck? That's really bizarre as well. Harrison suggested searching the beach and shoreline, an open area near their village, Robert Murat's property, apartment 5A, the Tapas Sevens apartments, and any hired vehicles. He recommended using ground-penetrating radar and bringing in Keela and Eddie, 2 Springer Spaniel sniffer dogs from South Yorkshire. They must have a good reputation. He knows them by name. All right, the British sniffer dogs arrive. Keela was a CSI dog trained to give her handler, Martin Grime, a passive alert to the scent of human blood by placing her nose to the spot, then freezing in that position. Eddie was an enhanced victim recovery dog, or cadaver dog, who gave a bark alert to the scent of human cadavers, including shortly after the death of the subject, even if the remains were buried, incinerated, or in water. He was trained to bark only in response to that scent and not for any other reason. The dogs arrived in Praia da Luz on July 31st, 2007, and were taken to apartment 5A, nearby Wasteland and the beach. Both dogs alerted behind the sofa in the living room of 5A, and Eddie gave an alert near the wardrobe in the main bedroom. There were no alerts on the beach or Wasteland. Another thing, would there have been alerts on the beach or wasteland this far after the disappearance? With the wind and all those things, I guess there would be. I mean, these are pretty good dogs, but the PJ obtained warrants to search the house that McCann's had rented on Rua das Flores and the silver Renault Scenic the couple had hired 24 days after Madeleine went missing. The house and grounds were searched on August 2nd. The only alert was from Eddie when he encountered Cuddle Cat, which was lying in the living room. Keela did not give an alert. The police left with boxes of the McCann's clothes, Cuddle Cat, a pair of latex gloves, suitcases, a notepad, 2 diaries, including one that Kate had started after the disappearance, and a friend's Bible she had borrowed. A passage the Bible's owner had marked from Samuel 2 was about the death of a child, was copied into the police case file along with a Portuguese translation. Keep in mind, this all seems to be going on July 31st, 2007, not immediately after. This is all with the dog search. The items were taken to another location where Eddie alerted to one of the boxes of clothes. A source close to the McCann's lawyers told reporters that if there was indeed a smell of corpses on Kate's clothes, it could have been caused by her contact with corpses as a family doctor. The police removed the silver Renault Scenic the McCanns had hired 3 weeks after the disappearance. And on August 6th, Keela and Eddie were taken to an underground car park opposite the PJ headquarters in Portimao, where 10 cars were parked, 20 to 30 feet apart, including the McCanns and Robert Murat's. It looks like this investigation, although it's moving slowly, I mean, they're actually doing tests and actually investigating. I mean, this is somewhat impressive. Eddie, the cadaver dog, gave an alert outside the McCann's car by the driver's door. The next morning, Keela alerted to the rear driver's side inside the trunk and the map compartment in the driver's door, which contained the ignition key and the key ring. When the key ring was hidden underneath sand in a fire bucket, she alerted again, as she did when the bucket was moved to a different floor of the car park. Almost immediately, the Portuguese press began running stories that Madeleine had died inside apartment 5A. British DNA analysis. Hair and other fibers were collected from areas in the car in apartment 5A where Keela and Eddie had given alerts and were sent to the Forensic Science Service in Birmingham for DNA profiling, arriving around August 8, 2007. At this point, according to the Sunday Times, the PJ abandoned the abduction theory. On August 8th, without waiting for the results from Birmingham, the Portuguese police called the McCanns to a meeting in Portimao where Guillermo Encarnação, PJ Regional Director, and Luis Neves, coordinator of the Direção Central de Combate de Banditismo in Lisbon, told them the case was now a murder inquiry. When Encarnação died of stomach cancer in 2010, the Daily Telegraph identified him as a major source of the leaks against the McCanns. Both the McCanns were interrogated that day. The officers suggest that Kate's memory was faulty. The FSS used a technique known as low copy number LCN testing. Used when only a few cells are available, the test is controversial because it is vulnerable to contamination and misinterpretation. Wow! That is interesting that they admit that. In the U.S., they don't quite roll that way. All right, September 3rd, John Lowe of the FSS emailed Detective Superintendent Stuart Pryor of the Leicestershire Police, the liaison officer between the British and Portuguese police. Lowe told Pryor that a sample from the car boot contained 15 out of 19 of Madeleine's DNA components, and that the result was, quote, too complex for meaningful interpretation, end quote. A complex LCN, low copy number, DNA result, which appeared to have originated from at least 3 people, was obtained from cellular material recovered from the luggage compartment section. Within the DNA profile of Madeleine McCann, there are 20 DNA components represented by 19 peaks on a chart. Of these 19 components, 15 are present within the results from this item. There are 37 components in total. There are 37 components because there are at least 3 contributors, but there could be up to 5. In my opinion, therefore, the result is too complex for meaningful interpretation or inclusion. We cannot answer the question, is the match genuine or is it a chance match? In other words, the result is not beyond a reasonable doubt. But if it does happen to be Madeleine's, then this is indeed very damning against the parents because they're randomly renting this car. What were they driving prior to this? And yeah, it's a rental car. It's really bizarre. If these dogs can be trusted, it's bizarre. McCann's made arguidos. John Lowe's email was translated into Portuguese on September 4th, 2007. The next day, according to Kate, the PJ proposed that if she were to admit that Madeleine had died in an accident in the apartment and that she had hidden the body, she might only serve a 2-year sentence. That is weird, though. Her husband would not be charged and would be free to leave. Both parents were given arguido status on September 7th and were advised by their lawyer not to answer questions. The PJ told Jerry that Madeleine's DNA had been found in the car boot and behind the sofa in 5A. Jerry did respond to questions, but Kate declined to reply to 48 questions she was asked during an 11-hour interview. Wow. Okay, all right, a lot of problems here. So Jerry did respond to questions, and Kate declined certain questions. 48 questions declined. Jerry, according to this, did not decline any. What does this all mean? Does this mean... So what are the possibilities? If there was some kind of an accident and she died during which she was checking on her, during the time that Kate was checking on her, she hid her behind the sofa and then in the closet, wasn't found, so everybody was out in the street looking, nobody found... What did they pay someone off for the sighting of a man carrying the child uncomfortably? Did somehow Murats get paid off to say that they saw some car? Or were those unrelated burglars, again with all the blonde people, the ugly blonde men, watching the apartment? Is that just all unrelated? Very, very difficult to make heads or tails here definitively. I mean, obviously, we're just doing an overview here. We're not going super, super detailed. I just wanted to lay out the case for and against these different theories. And it seems aspects of the investigation could have been bungled, again, through mistranslations and the like. But other aspects, they're doing real investigation here, especially with these dog tests and the spacing of the vehicles. There was definitely some work done here. The DNA evidence was 100% match, journalists in Portugal were told. So they were not informed about the drawbacks or possible inaccuracies, the limitations of this test. British tabloid headlines included Brit Lab bombshell, car DNA is 100% Maddie's. This was in the September 11, 2007 in The Sun, and corpse in McCann car, London Evening Standard, October 16, 2007. And the Daily Star reported that, quote, clump of Maddie's hair, end quote, had been found in the car. The leaks came directly from the Portuguese police, according to testimony in 2012 from Jerry Lawton, a Daily Star reporter, to the Levinson inquiry. Matt Baggett, who, when Madeleine disappeared, was chief constable of Leicestershire Police, the force that coordinated the British side of the case, told the inquiry that because the Portuguese were in charge of the case, he made a decision not to correct reporters. His force's priority, he said, was to maintain a good relationship with the PJ with a view to finding Madeleine. You know what's almost ironic here is that the British limitations of the test were known, but it was mistranslated into Portuguese, and then from the Portuguese translation back to the British reporters are reporting 100%. It's just bizarre. All right, the McCanns returned to the UK and the Almeida report. Despite their arguido status, the McCanns were allowed to leave Portugal and on legal advice did so immediately. arriving back in England on September 9, 2007. The following day, Chief Inspector Tavares de Almeida of the PJ in Portimao signed a 9-page report concluding that Madeleine had died in apartment 5A as a result of an accident, that the restaurant meal and apparent regular checks on the McCann children had been part of the cover-up, that the Tapas 7 had helped to mislead police, and that the McCanns had concealed the body, then faked an abduction. You know what's weird, though? With the Tapas 7, I mean, if they're good human beings, how many people would help their friends cover up a child's death? I mean, I don't know. I don't know how close. It's apparently some of those people were acquaintances and not quite friends. So, yeah, it's rough. An 11-page document from the Information Analysis Brigade in Lisbon analyzed alleged discrepancies in the McCann statements. On September 11th, the public prosecutor Jose Cuna de Magalhães e Meneses handed the 10-volume case file to a judge, Pedro Miguel dos Anjos Frias. Meneses applied for the seizure of Kate's diary and Jerry's laptop. The police also wanted to trace telephone calls the McCanns and Tapas 7 had made, and there were details in the report that the number of suitcases the McCanns and their friends had taken back to England. On September 28, 2007, according to a diplomatic cable published by WikiLeaks in 2010, the American ambassador to Portugal, Al Hoffman, wrote about a meeting he had with the British ambassador to Portugal, Alexander Ellis, on September 21, 2007. The cable said, without delving into the details of the case, Ellis admitted that the British police had developed the current evidence against the McCann parents, and he stressed that authorities from both countries were working cooperatively. He commented that the media frenzy was to be expected and was acceptable as long as government officials kept their comments behind closed doors. In the UK, Control Risks, a British security company paid by an anonymous donor to assist the McCanns since May 7, 2007, took hair samples from the McCann twins on September 24, 2007 at their parents' request. The twins had slept through the commotion in apartment 5A after Madeleine was reported missing. Kate wrote that she was concerned the abductor might have given the children sedatives. All right, this is the first major red flag to me regarding Kate McCann, like major red flag. Because that does seem like she's trying to cover up if she gave them sedatives. Why would an abductor give them sedatives to take another child when they could have just taken all of them? Or were they just that scared that the children... I mean, yeah, I don't know. According to the PJ files, Kate had asked them to take samples 3 months after the disappearance, but they had not done so. Control Risks took a sample from Kate, too, to rebut allegations that she was on medication. No traces of drugs was found. Why wouldn't she be on medication, though? A mother grieving over... I mean, you'd be distraught. You'd be distraught whatever happened to your child. I mean, regardless of what really happened. Okay, Gonzalo Amaral's removal and later developments. On October 2nd, 2007, Chief Inspector Gonzalo Amaral, the inquiries coordinator, was removed from his post and transferred from Portimao to Faro after telling the newspaper Diário de Notícias that the British police had only pursued leads helpful to the McCanns. As an example, he criticized their decision to follow up on an anonymous email to Prince Charles that claimed a former Ocean Club employee had taken Madeleine. Amaral himself was made an arguido 1 day after Madeleine's disappearance in relation to his investigation of another case, the disappearance of Ioana Cipriano. The following month, he was charged with making a false statement, and 4 other officers were charged with assault. 8-year-old Ioana Cipriano had vanished in 2004 from Figueira, 7 miles from Praia da Luz. Her body was never found and no murder weapon identified. Her mother and the mother's brother were convicted of her murder after confessing, but the mother recanted her confession, saying she had been beaten by police. Amaral was not present when the beating is alleged to have taken place, but he was accused of having covered up for others. The other detectives were acquitted. Amaral was convicted of perjury in May 2009 and received an 18-month suspended sentence. You can't make this stuff up, ladies and gentlemen. The people involved in this case, it's really bizarre. It's like a perfect recipe for a case not getting solved, but hopefully closure is upon us. The Madeleine inquiry was taken over by Paolo Rebello, Deputy National Director of the PJ, which expanded its team of detectives and began a new case review. On November 29, 2007, 4 members of the Portuguese inquiry, including Francisco Corte Real, Vice President of Portugal's Forensic Crime Service, were briefed at Leicestershire Police Headquarters by the British Forensic Science Service. In April 2008, the Tapas 7 were interviewed in England by Leicestershire Police with the PJ in attendance. The PJ planned the following month to hold a reconstruction in Praia da Luz using the McCanns and Tapas 7 rather than actors, but the Tapas 7 declined to participate. Again, we do have we have some gusto being employed by these investigators here. I mean, in how many cases are witnesses asked to create a reconstruction of events? Now, them denying doesn't really mean anything. I mean, they might have busy lives, and if they feel the police want to trap them, and they aren't really looking for the truth, they're looking for an excuse to put charges against them. Obviously, they would decline, especially with this other guy's removal for allegedly covering up officers that beat a mother into a false confession, allegedly. I mean, that's dark. It doesn't quite state whether there was a recanting by the brother, the mother's brother. I guess that would be Ioana Cipriano's uncle. And they wanted both of them to confess. I mean, that's a dark case as well. There are theories, of course, that the police or certain elements of the police would have been corrupt, possibly complicit, even directly working with some of these upper-level political child trafficking rings. Poor relationship between the McCanns and the Portuguese police was evident again that month on the day the couple were at the European Parliament to promote a monitoring system for missing children. Transcripts of their interviews with the PJ were leaked to Spanish television. The national director of the PJ, Alipio Ribeiro, resigned not long after this, citing media pressure. He had publicly said the police had been hasty in naming the McCanns as suspects. As of May 2008, Portuguese prosecutors were examining several charges against the McCanns, including child abandonment, abduction, homicide, and concealment of corpse. Inquiries closed July 21st, 2008. The Portuguese Attorney General, Fernando José Pinto Monteiro, announced that there was no evidence to link the McCanns or Robert Murat to the disappearance. Their arguido status was lifted and the case was closed. On August 4th, Portugal's Ministério Público published 17 case files containing 11,233 pages on CD-ROM to the media, including 2,550 pages of sightings. I mean, this was definitely a thorough investigation, regardless whether it was bungled or not. There was a lot of legwork down here. The files included a 58-page prosecutor's report, which concluded, quote, no element of proof whatsoever was found which allows us to form any lucid, sensible, serious, and honest conclusion about the circumstances, end quote. Can you imagine American law enforcement or courts or the court system in having that kind of report where they admit they don't know something? Okay. In 2009, Portugal released a further 2,000 pages. Days after the case closed, excerpts from Kate McCann's diary, which had been taken by the PJ in August 2007, were published in translation by a Portuguese tabloid, Correio de Mana, despite a Portuguese judge's ruling in 2008 that the seizure had been a privacy violation and that any copies must be destroyed. On September 14, 2008, a News International tabloid, News of the World, published the extracts again without permission and now translated poorly back into English. So this is all problematic because we have this unnecessary broken telephone because the original's in English, then they translated it to Portuguese, then back to English. So now how accurately was it translated into the Portuguese the first time, especially if a tabloid was behind it? And then how accurately is it translated from the possibly not very accurately translated text in the first place? And that'd be interesting to see just the effects of Broken Telephone by comparing the original versus the English translated from the Portuguese translated from the English. Amaral's book, July 24th, 2008, the bad feeling between the McCanns and the PJ had reached such a height that Chief Inspector Gonzalo Amaral resigned in June 2008 to write a book alleging that Madeleine had died in an accident in the apartment and that to cover it up, the McCanns had faked an abduction. 3 days after the case closed, his book, Maddie, A Verdade de Mentira, Maddie, The Truth of the Lie, was published in Portugal by Gura and Paz. By November 2008, it had sold 180,000 copies, and by 2010, it had been translated into 6 languages. A documentary based on the book was broadcast in TVI in Portugal in April 2009, watched by 2.2 million people. The McCanns began a libel action against Amaral and his publisher in 2009. Madeleine's fund covered the legal fees. In 2015, they were awarded over 600,000 euros in libel damages. Amaral's appeal against that decision succeeded in 2016. A judge had issued an injunction against further publication or sales of the book in 2009, but the Lisbon Court of Appeal overturned the ban in 2010, stating that it violated Amaral's freedom of expression. The ban was reinstated in 2015 as part of the libel ruling, then lifted when Amaral's appeal succeeded in 2016, and back and forth we go. The McCanns appealed the 2016 decision to Portugal's Supreme Court, but the court ruled against them in February 2017. In their 76-page ruling, the judges wrote that the McCanns had not in fact been cleared by the archiving of the criminal case in 2008. In March 2017, the Supreme Court rejected the McCanns' final appeal. I wonder what will happen if the case is 100% resolved regarding that. But anyway, let's move on to the Madeleine's Fund inquiry, which was between 2007 and 2011. The McCanns set up Madeleine's Fund, leaving no stone unturned, limited on May 15, 2007, 12 days after the disappearance. Over 80 million people visited the fund's website in the 3 months after the disappearance. From September 2007, Brian Kennedy of Everest Windows supported the couple financially, and Kennedy's lawyer joined the fund's board of directors. As of February 2017, it had 7 directors, including the McCanns. Appeals by public figures were screened at football matches across Britain. Between May 2007 and March 2008, the fund received £1,846,178, including £1.4 million through the bank, $390,000 online, $64,000 from merchandise. Donations included $250,000 from the News of the World, $250,000 from Sir Philip Green, $50,000 from Simon Cowell, $25,000 from Colleen Rooney. J.K. Rowling and Richard Branson made large donations. Branson donated $100,000 to the McCanns' legal fund. Madeleine's fund did not cover the couple's legal costs arising from their status as Arguidos, but it was criticized in October 2007 for having made 2 of the McCanns' mortgage payments before they were made Arguidos. A reward of $2.5 million was also offered, including from the News of the World, Rowling, Branson Green, and a Scottish businessman, Stephen Wynyard. In March 2008, the Express Group paid the fund $550,000 and $375,000 in libel damages arising out of articles about the McCanns and Tapas 7, respectively. 2011, Kate McCann's book, Madeleine, was serialized by The Sun and the Sunday Times, both owned by News International, for a payment for the fund of $500,000 to £1 million. In December 2015, the fund stood at around $750,000. Private eyes, Madeleine's fund hired several private firms of private investigators, causing friction with the Portuguese police. Shortly after the disappearance, an anonymous benefactor paid for the services of a British security company, Control Risks. There had reportedly been 4 independent sightings from North Africa. Brian Kennedy went to Morocco himself in 2007, September, to look into one. A Norwegian woman had reported seeing a girl matching Madeleine's description in a patrol station near Marrakesh, Morocco, on May 9th, 2007. This is 6 days after the disappearance. The child had reportedly asked the man she was with in English, "Can we see Mummy soon?" When the witness returned home to Spain, she learned about the disappearance and telephoned the Spanish police. A month later, according to Kate McCann, the police had still not formally interviewed the woman, which led the McCanns to fear that leads were not being pursued. The McCanns themselves traveled to Morocco on June 10, 2007 to raise awareness. Which also is an interesting question. How far would you go to cover this all up? Because in other cases, like let's say the parents are responsible in other cases, they return home, whatever, there might be certain comments. Are they traveling the world following up on every single sighting of their child to keep up appearances? I don't know. I really don't know, but these are important questions to ask. They spent the night at the British ambassador's residence and were briefed by consular staff and a metropolitan police attaché. Brian Kennedy hired a Spanish agency, Metodo 3, for 6 months at £50,000 a month, which put 35 investigators on the case in Europe and Morocco. It seems the relationship came to an end in part because the head of the agency made several public statements that concerned the McCanns, including to CBS that, quote, "We know the kidnapper, we know who he is, and how he has done it," end quote. You know what's weird, though, is that just a ploy to bring out a perpetrator? They don't really mean that. We see that all the time, too. Hoping that certain individuals will run. Like, for example, if there's certain known traffickers in that area of Morocco, immediately after the statement, within 24, 48 hours, if one of them just up and runs, who knows, or makes some sudden moves or does something to draw attention to themselves as a result of that statement, that could be that kind of a ploy. I don't know. Seems kind of strange. Another private investigator was David Edgar, a retired detective inspector hired in 2009 on the recommendation of the head of Manchester's Serious Crime Squad. Edgar released an e-fit in August that year of a woman said to have asked 2 British men in Barcelona, Spain, shortly after the disappearance, whether they were there to deliver her new daughter. Wow, that's disturbing. So this was August 2009. 2 years after. When was this said to have happened? So the source for this is a Telegraph article from August 7th, 2009. Private detectives searching for Madeleine McCann have received hundreds of calls after appealing for information about a mysterious woman, the family's spokesman said. The investigators yesterday issued an e-fit of the woman described as an Australian Victoria Beckham lookalike, who reportedly asked a witness if he was there to deliver her, quote, new daughter, end quote, just days after the little girl's disappearance. So apparently this was a few days after the disappearance, and this woman looks like Victoria Beckham. I mean, I don't know, just a lot of strangeness here. Clarence Mitchell, spokesperson for Madeleine's parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, said there had already been a substantial response to the appeal, including several possible names for the woman. The private detectives are now going through the information from the public and deciding which leads to follow up on. We have had a substantial response overnight with many hundreds of calls coming in particular from Australia. I understand many calls have been made to the Australian police. As we stressed yesterday, the Australian dimension is just one part of the overall investigation into Madeleine's disappearance, and work is continuing on several fronts. Just over 72 hours after the disappearance, May 3rd, 2007, in the early hours of May 7th, 2 British men saw the woman while on a night out in the popular Port Olympic Marina in Barcelona, Spain. So this is early hours of May 7th, several days after the disappearance. She was well dressed but appeared agitated and kept walking up and down outside the El Rey de la Gamba restaurant bar as if she was waiting to meet somebody. When one of the British men approached and spoke to her, she reportedly asked him, "Are you here to deliver my new daughter?" Mr. Mitchell refused to confirm or deny any details about this conversation. After speaking to the witness, the woman went into a bar next door where she had a heated conversation with a local in what seemed to be fluent Spanish. The British man, who has not been named but is a married 41-year-old professional without children, did not disclose his brief conversation with the woman until he approached the McCann's investigators 6 weeks ago. So this is 6 weeks prior to August 7th, 2009. So 2 years after this tip has been put forth about something that happened just over 72 hours after the disappearance 2 years prior. He approached the McCann's investigators. The woman was described by the main witness as, quote, a bit of a Victoria Beckham look-alike, end quote, and could be Australian based on her accent. The McCann's private detectives said it was, quote, most definitely possible that Madeleine was smuggled hundreds of miles from Algarve to Barcelona by yacht. So this is very problematic because of the time period it was reported. Originally, the first thing that jumped out at me here was if the McCanns were responsible, or even someone else, did they pay off this witness and even this woman who's apparently fluent in Spanish, but is Australian possibly, and looks like Victoria Beckham? Did someone pay her to cause this scene, or to say, like, was that staged to divert attention away from the McCanns? Because originally, if it was reported at that time, so this is 72 hours, just over 72 hours after the disappearance, are those 2 days enough for them to call someone to create this situation? Are there other witnesses to this situation? Now, obviously, if the McCanns' phone records were, I guess they could have made a call from a payphone or something, but I don't know. It's all very, very bizarre. Is this legitimate? Was this another individual who was trying to get a kid trafficked in that area? And so this sighting occurred in Barcelona. Not Portugal, but it's not Morocco, which is also not infinitely far away. This is all the same region of the world, in that Mediterranean region. Very, very bizarre. Very, very bizarre. I mean, both of those sightings could allegedly have been legitimate, or neither, or mistaken. Although it's troubling either way. I mean, if other people are being trafficked, that's also troubling, even if it had nothing to do with Madeleine McCann. All right. Other private investigators included a Portuguese lawyer financing the search of a reservoir near Praia da Luz in February 2008, and the use of ground radar by a South African property developer, Stephen Birch, who said in 2012 that scans showed there were bones beneath the driveway of a house in Praia da Luz. So this is a very, very bizarre Huffington Post article. This was published September 20th, 2012. Madeleine McCann may be buried under driveway. Authorities seem unwilling to investigate. The mystery of Madeleine McCann's disappearance may lie under a driveway just outside a holiday villa in Praia da Luz, the oceanside Portuguese resort town where the 3-year-old child was last seen in May 2007. Stephen Birch, a South African real estate developer and self-styled investigator, says he has found what could be a burial site below the surface using a ground-penetrating radar. Birch, who has invested $50,000 of his own money investigating the case, has asked Portuguese authorities to excavate the area, and 3 experts contacted by HuffPost Crime agreed that this would be the appropriate action. Nevertheless, Portuguese authorities refused to act on the information. The property is owned by the mother of a former suspect, Robert Murat. The scans indicate that the ground beneath the gravel driveway was disturbed and something lies buried underneath the driveway, Birch told the Huffington Post. The location of the property is not far from the apartment where Madeleine disappeared. Madeleine was 3 years old when she went on a trip from Britain to Portugal with her parents, Kate and Jerry McCann. The couple was dining with friends at a nearby restaurant when the little girl vanished from their holiday apartment in Praia da Luz. There have been no solid leads in the case since that time. Scotland Yard detectives and Portuguese police were provided with hard copies of Birch's scans. The agencies examined them and thus far have declined to probe or excavate the location. The Office of the Prime Minister of Portugal sent Birch a letter on September 10th, which included a response from Almeida Rodrigues, head of Portugal's judicial police. According to the letter, authorities examined the same location with the ground-penetrating radar device in 2007 and did not find any areas of interest. Well, did he have more advanced ground-penetrating technology? Let's see here. Therefore, we are of the opinion that this does not justify the realization of the desired diligence by the advocate, they wrote. A similar statement was made by Murat in July during an interview with the Algarve resident. Every single part of the house, inside and out, was checked in 2007 by more than 20 police officers who found absolutely nothing. They used ground-penetrating radar equipment, which was brought by a civil protection team to search the grounds of the property and the area surrounding Casa Liliana, Murat said. Speaking with the same newspaper, former police inspector Gonzalo Amaral described the 2007 searches as thorough. Birch contends that the location where a suspicious scan was taken was not searched properly. He claims it was covered with vegetation and debris from construction materials, and it would not have been possible to conduct the scanning on the rubble. Also, if you were hiding a body, would you put rubble on? I don't know. It's all very bizarre. But I just, again, I'm reminded of Murat's mother's sighting of a rental car going the wrong way, speeding towards the apartment where Madeleine was abducted from, allegedly, down a one-way street. Just very, very bizarre. And then they also claimed to both be home at the time. So, yeah, it's bizarre. I am in possession of photographs taken on May 15th, 2007, during the initial search of the Murat property, together with a photo taken 5 months later of the same yard. When comparing the two photos, one can clearly see a pile of building rubble with a wooden plank lying on top of it. Both photos show the same pile of rubble in exactly the same condition in the rear of the Murat yard, substantiating the claim that the Murat property was not searched properly, Birch said. That brings us again back to the issue of ego. What would certain investigators, especially corrupt ones, what would certain investigators do to prevent solving a case if that prevention prevented them from looking stupid or incompetent as well? Because if they had just searched it properly, like let's say she is buried there, if they had searched it properly the first time around, they would have found her. So it's kind of bizarre. But anyway, 3 out of 4 GPR specialists who were shown Birch's scan agree authorities should excavate the area in question. There are anomalous features in the GPR data that may be due to human remains, but whether or not the data indicate the presence of remains cannot be determined solely from the GPR data. You must dig to find out, said Gary N. Young, Senior Vice President of Operations and Development for Underground Imaging Technologies, LLC. Michael Walmorans of Imbilla Location Services, CC, agreed. After scrutinizing various scans emailed to me, there is a strong possibility of ground disturbance. At the 3-meter mark at a depth of 250 to 300 millimeters, there is a distinct sign of a void. This suggests that the ground has been disturbed by digging. Below the void, there is an object, though it is not possible to say what it is without excavating. If this were my own investigation, I would have little doubt that an excavation of the area would be required, and this is what I would do, Walmorans said. Ralph Baird, a geophysicist from Houston, also suggested a dig. What is shown in one GPR profile and in a local area is just that there are objects in the box dirt-filled area. The process needs to just dig and remove the dirt. The area is small enough for that to happen under professional or videoed supervision. Dig it up or probe it and see what is there. It's a small task, the digging, Baird said. Brian Batchelor, president of Digital Concrete Imaging in Tampa, Florida, had a slightly different opinion. There isn't enough for me to compare typical soils to. However, there are minor disturbances that can be interpreted as human remains. With that said, I think the area is too shallow and 100 millimeters below the surface is a tar layer. Highly unlikely that a criminal would dig through such hard materials and in the open space of a driveway. My opinion is that this is not a crime scene, Batchelor said. You know what's weird, though? Obviously, they can ask even more experts. I mean, there's only a couple of experts. They could ask, let's say, another 10, 20 more, see what they say. However, again, the case is unsolved. There's no body yet. So if you're going to do the most thorough investigation possible, and I'm sure there are people that have donated that would even pay the Murats to be able to dig, right? Obviously with the stipulation that if they actually find the body there, they might not get the money or whatever. But that way, the Murats can just make some decent money while helping investigators. The Huffington Post notified the officer of the Prime Minister and Portugal's judicial police about the expert's opinion. Neither agency responded to a request for comment. Carter Ruck, the law firm representing Madeleine's parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, said they stand behind the decision of the authorities not to dig. Mr. and Mrs. McCann are guided by the expertise of the British and Portuguese police, both of which have studied the information provided by Mr. Birch and both of which had concluded is not credible. Isabel Martorell, a partner at the firm, told HuffPost. That's beyond bizarre to me. They're willing to hire all these psychics and all these other people that can find with these magical technologies alleged, but they're not willing to dig based on a GPR scan, which, again, obviously inconclusive results, but it's from a real GPR scan. It's not a psychic vision, which, again, maybe the psychic vision is true or not, but I think most people would agree a GPR scan, even non-definitive GPR scan, is a little bit more solid than psychic visions, which, again, either may or may not be true, but that's really bizarre. I find that bizarre. I don't know. Just another one of these weird things in the case. There is, as Birch points out, only one way to settle the controversy. Dig. If you think I am wrong, then I am going to ask you one simple question. A question millions of people are asking. Why haven't they dug or put probes down there? And that's an excellent question because the investigation obviously reaches far and wide. You have investigators going to all these different countries. You have police doing these dog tests with multiple cars spaced out. And it's just with the exact car of also the rental car that the McCanns rented. There's just so much being done and they can't do a little dig. It is bizarre. I mean, I have to say, it's a bit bizarre. Especially this is a high-profile case. Again, I'm sure there'd be people donating to the Murats for the permission to dig there because they have nothing to lose if they're getting a ton of money. Unless, of course, there is something there. I don't know. It's bizarre. All right, let's move on to Oakley International. In 2008, Madeleine's fund hired Oakley International, a Washington, D.C. registered detective agency, for over £500,000 for 6 months. The company owner, Kevin Halligan, was arrested in 2009 in connection with an unrelated fraud allegation. He died in 2018. Oakley sent a 5-man team to Portugal, led by Henry Exton, a former British police officer who had worked for MI5. The team engaged in undercover operations within the Ocean Club and among pedophile rings and the Roma community. So let me get this straight. They're willing to dump hundreds of thousands of dollars over a period of months using MI5 operatives, but they didn't want to dig up a driveway. I don't know. It seems a little strange to me. It seems a little bit strange to me. Exton questioned the significance of the Tanner sighting of a man carrying a child at 9:15 near apartment 5A and focused instead on the Smith sighting at 10 o'clock, the sighting by Martin and Mary Smith of a man carrying a child toward the beach. The Oakley team produced EFITs based on the Smith's description. This was a sensitive issue because on September 9, 2007, Martin Smith had watched BBC footage of the McCanns arrive in the UK from Portugal at the height of public debate about their alleged involvement. As Jerry McCann exited the craft with his son in his arms, Smith believed he recognized him as the man he had seen carrying the child in Praia da Luz. Now, can this case get any weirder? Just when you think this tangled web of bizarre questions and unsubstantiated claims can't get any more bizarre or tangled up, we have the Smith witness. However, supposedly both Martin and Mary Smith saw the man carrying a child toward the beach. So, Martin saw this footage of the McCanns arriving in the UK from Portugal at the height of debate about their alleged involvement. He believes that this is the man that was carrying the child in Praia da Luz. He reported his suspicion to Leicestershire police, but later came to accept that he was mistaken. At 10 o'clock, witnesses placed Jerry in the tapas restaurant. Nevertheless, publication of the Smith efforts, which bore some resemblance to Jerry, would have fed the conspiracy theories about the McCanns. Exton submitted his report to Madeleine's fund in November 2008 and suggested releasing the EFITs, but the fund told Exton that the report and its EFITs had to remain confidential. The relationship between the company and the fund had soured, in part because of a dispute over fees, and in part because the report was critical of the McCanns and their friends. It suggested that Madeleine may have died in an accident after leaving the apartment herself through its unlocked patio doors. Madeleine's fund passed the EFITs to the police. The PJ and Leicestershire police had them by October 2009, and Scotland Yard received them when they became involved in August 2011, all these years later, but did not release them either at that time. Kate McCann did not include them with the other images of suspects in her book Madeleine 2011, although she suggested that both the Tanner and Smith sightings were crucial. Oh man, my head is spinning from all of this. Both sightings were crucial in what sense? That they just should both be investigated? That's a little different than saying they're both crucial, as in critical, as in dependent on this case being solved. Crucial. That's really bizarre. That is very, very bizarre. I really don't know what to make of this information, especially them not releasing the EFITs. Did they just really think that it looked that much like Jerry McCann? And that's why it wasn't released all this time? Because other than them actually having a suspect that they didn't want to become publicly spooked, like let's say they did have a suspect, they knew the guy, and if they knew he was part of some bigger ring, they wanted to bust the whole thing up, so they didn't want to release his image publicly and catch him just to catch him. They wanted the bigger fish as well, which is typical in law enforcement. So is that why it hadn't been released? And then when they just either maybe they lost the guy completely, and if they were following or whatnot, they lost him for a long period of time, and at that point, they released the EFITs. I don't know. Mindshock listeners out there, you can comment your own theories about this and all these other issues in this case. I really don't know. And also why Kate McCann specifically didn't include them with other images of suspects in her book. However, if she was instructed not to because it could jeopardize the case, and she just viewed that as different avenues to be investigated, I really don't know. I don't know. She suggested both Tanner and Smith sightings were crucial. Okay. Scotland Yard released the EFITs October 2013 for a BBC Crime Watch reconstruction. After it had aired, the Sunday Times published that the McCanns had had the EFITs since 2008. In response, the couple complained that the Sunday Times story wrongly implied that the McCanns not only failed to publish the EFITs, but had withheld them from the police. The newspaper published an apology on an inside page in December 2013. The McCanns subsequently sued and received £55,000 in damages, which Jerry McCann said would be donated to charity. Someone could follow up on that to see if it was actually donated to charity. All right, let's move on to the later police inquiries. The Gamble Report. All right, the McCanns met the British Home Secretary Alan Johnson in 2009 to request a review of the case. Johnson commissioned a scoping report from Jim Gamble, the head of the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Center. By March 2010, the Home Office had begun discussion with the Association of Chief Police Officers about setting up a British inquiry. Delivered in May 2010, the Gamble Report examined how several British agencies had become involved in the search for Madeleine, including CEOP itself, Leicestershire Police, the Metropolitan Police Service, the Serious Organised Crime Agency, and National Police Improvement Agency, Crime Stoppers, the Home Office, Foreign Office, and 10 Downing Street. And for those that don't know, in the British circles, 10 Downing Street is simply known as Number 10. It's the headquarters of the government of the UK and the official residence and office of the First Lord of the Treasury, a post which for much of the 18th and 19th centuries, and invariably since 1905, has been held by the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. The term 10 Downing Street, or just Downing Street, is also used to mean the Prime Minister's office. Okay, so Gamble criticized the lack of coordination. Everyone had wanted to help, and some had wanted to be seen to help, he wrote, which had created a sense of chaos and a sense of competition, hampering the inquiry by causing resentment among the Portuguese police. He recommended renewed cooperation between the British and the Portuguese, that all relevant information be exchanged between the police forces, that police perform an analysis of telephone calls made on the night of the disappearance, and that all leads be pursued, including those developed by private detectives. Now, this guy sounds like a smart man. I can't argue with any of that. Operation Grange. In May 2011, under Home Secretary Theresa May, Scotland Yard launched an investigation review, Operation Grange, with a team of 29 detectives and 8 civilians. The announcement of the review appeared to have been triggered by a News International campaign by way of one of its British tabloids, The Sun. On May 11, 2011, as it was serializing Kate McCann's book, Madeleine, The Sun's front page hosted an open letter from the McCanns in which they asked Prime Minister David Cameron to set up a new inquiry. 20,000 people signed the newspaper's petition that day. On the same day, according to her testimony to the Leveson inquiry, Theresa May spoke by telephone at her instigation to Rebecca Brooks, chief executive of News International, and Dominic Mohan, editor of The Sun. The next day, she wrote the commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Sir Paul Stevenson, to say that the Portuguese police had agreed to cooperate with the British inquiry. Within 24 hours, Cameron made the announcement about Operation Grange to be financed by a Home Office contingency fund. Operation Grange was led by Commander Simon Foy. Detective Chief Inspector Andy Redwood of Scotland Yard's Homicide and Serious Crime Command was the first senior investigating officer reporting to Detective Chief Superintendent Hamish Campbell. The team consisted of 3 detective inspectors, 5 detective sergeants, 19 detective constables, and around 6 civilian staff. When Redwood retired in 2014, he was replaced by DCI Nicola Wall. By July 2013, the review had become an investigation. The team had tens of thousands of documents translated, released an age-progressed image, and investigated over 8,000 potential sightings. All right, so like I said before, bungled or not, we cannot claim that investigation was not done here. I mean, this is just an exhaustive, comprehensive investigation. However, they won't dig up Murat's mother's driveway. I don't know. All right. By 2015, they had taken 1,338 statements, collected 1,027 exhibits, and investigated 650 sex offenders and 60 persons of interest. The inquiry was scaled back October 2015, and the number of officers reduced to 4. Now, after such an exhaustive investigation, I think criticism isn't quite as warranted as in other cold cases or other cases where not much is done and then they just put one officer on there. I mean, when you have these kinds of numbers and man hours relating to the investigation, if nothing's moving, I could see why there could be a reduction. But let's move on. The Home Secretary approved an additional £95,000 of funding in April 2016 for what the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe, said was one remaining line of inquiry. Another £85,000 was approved to cover up to 2017, and £150,000 to cover until March 31st, 2019, taking the cost of the inquiry to £11.75 million. That's a bit perplexing. I mean, everything from MI5 officers, security firms, globe-trotting PIs, local police, of which, I mean, there are these investigators being fired, others coming in. I mean, you have just, this has been a comprehensive and vast and very expensive, very, very expensive investigation. The Home Office said it would approve similar funding for 2019. All right. So, wow. I mean, this is mind-boggling. I mean, it's kind of nice that people are willing to put in this kind of money and manpower into finding a missing child and having justice for that child if she's dead and she hasn't been trafficked, and if she has been trafficked, to try to find her. Obviously, it's bigger than just her, because if they're busting up all these rings, I mean, obviously that's money well spent if they're catching these traffickers and preventing further trafficking. But Yeah, I mean, obviously efficiency is still in question, but yeah, that's a lot of money and it's a big investigation. All right, theories: planned abduction, burglary, wandered off. DCI Redwood made clear that Operation Grange was looking at a criminal act by a stranger, most likely a planned abduction or a burglary that Madeleine had disturbed. And we didn't even talk about that. Huh, because there's so much evidence of these guys scoping out these apartments in that block, white vans, ugly looking blonde men. Did Madeleine, yeah, if she stumbled upon the burglary, I mean, are they really that concerned that a 3-year-old's going to ID them? Maybe, I don't know. Okay. There had been a 4-fold increase in local burglaries between January and May 2007, including 2 in the McCann's block in the 17 days before the disappearance, during which intruders had entered through windows. In an interview in April 2017, just before the 10th anniversary of the disappearance, Scotland Yard's Assistant Commissioner Mark Rowley appeared to dismiss the burglary gone wrong hypothesis while adding that it was not entirely ruled out. I mean, that's good. It's not complete tunnel vision. Referring to the suspects who might have been involved in burglaries in the area, he said that police had pretty much closed off that group of people. I'm not sure what that means. The remaining detectives were focusing on a small number of inquiries that they believed were significant. Also that month, there were claims that Scotland Yard was looking for a woman seen near 5A at the time of the disappearance. Now, of course, I haven't talked about this specifically, but in child abductions and these rings, or even in adult human trafficking where they're trafficking young women, other women are obviously used in the operation because they might not necessarily look as suspicious as a shady-looking, ugly blonde man, or intimidating, and they could also possibly lure young women with job offers or just whatever. Their guard is not going to be up the same way as with an intimidating group of men. So I don't know. Again, this sighting of this woman is interesting as well. Redwood said in 2013 that on one reading of the evidence, the disappearance did look like a pre-planned abduction, which undoubtedly would have involved reconnaissance. Several witnesses described men hanging around near apartment 5A in the days before the disappearance and on the day itself. In May 2013, Scotland Yard wanted to trace 12 manual workers who were at Ocean Club when Madeleine disappeared, including 6 British cleaners in a white van who were offering their services to British expats. In October 2013, Scotland Yard and the BBC's Crime Watch staged a reconstruction broadcast in the UK, the Netherlands, and Germany, during which they released e-fits of the men seen near 5A and of the Smith sighting. And we do seem to see these connections to Germany constantly. And obviously, it will be going into the new suspect and all of these things as well. Days after Crime Watch aired, Portugal's Attorney General reopened the Portuguese inquiry, citing new evidence. Another theory is that Madeleine, nearly 4 at the time, left the apartment by herself, perhaps to look for her parents, and was abducted by a passerby or fell into one of the open construction sites nearby. This is widely regarded as unlikely. According to her mother, Madeleine would have had to open the unlocked patio doors, close the curtains behind her, close the door again, open and close the child gate at the top of the stairs, then open and close the gate leading to the street. Yeah, I don't know. Tracking mobile phone calls. Using mobile phone tracking techniques and with the cooperation of over 30 countries, police traced who had used cell phones near the scene of the disappearance within the important time frame. The analysis turned up several calls and texts near the Ocean Club between a 30-year-old former Ocean Club bus driver and his 24-year-old and 53-year-old associates. Detectives interviewed them June 2014. What took so long? They denied any connection to the disappearance. Police also found that the cell phone of a former Ocean Club restaurant worker had been used near the resort that night. Originally from Cape Verde, West Africa, Euclides Monteiro died in 2009 in a tractor accident after being fired from the Ocean Club in 2006 for theft. The suspicion was that he had been breaking into apartments to finance a drug habit. His widow said he had been questioned previously about break-ins involving the sexual assault of children, but had been cleared by DNA evidence. holiday home sexual assaults. Scotland Yard issued another appeal in 2014 for information about a man who had entered holiday homes occupied by British families in 4 incidents in the Western Algarve between 2004 and 2006, 2 of them in Praia da Luz. On those occasions, he had sexually assaulted 5 white girls aged 7 to 10 in their beds. The man spoke English with a foreign accent, and his speech was slow and perhaps slurred. He had short, dark, unkempt hair, tanned skin, and in the view of 3 victims, a distinctive smell. He may have worn a long-sleeved burgundy top, perhaps with a white circle on the back. These were among 12 incidents in the area between 2004 and 2010. The PJ reportedly believed the intruder in the 4 incidents between 2004 and 2006 was Euclides Monteiro, the former Ocean Club employee from Cape Verde, who died in 2009. I mean, we're not in the 80s and 90s here. What's going on with that DNA evidence? Did it point to someone else, or was it simply inconclusive? Did it completely exonerate him, or was it just inconclusive? Searches and interviews in Praia da Luz. In June 2014, officers from Scotland Yard and the PJ, accompanied by archaeologists and sniffer dogs, searched drains and dug in 60,000 square meters of wasteland in Praia da Luz. Nothing was found. The following month, at Scotland Yard's request, the PJ in Faro interviewed 4 Portuguese citizens, with Scotland Yard in attendance. No evidence was found to implicate them. One man, an associate of Robert Murat, was first questioned shortly after the disappearance. Pedro de Carmo, deputy director of the PJ, told the BBC that the interviews had been conducted only because Scotland Yard had requested them. So he didn't think it was important to interview anybody? This is weird. 11 people, including 3 Britons, were interviewed in December 2014. According to the Portuguese media, Scotland Yard compiled 253 questions for the interviewees, including, did you kill Madeleine, and where did you hide the body? 253 questions, that's a lot of questions. Again, it seems to appear, again, bungled or not, you can't accuse them of not being thorough, except in the not digging of Murat's mother's driveway. Okay, Robert Murat, his wife, and her ex-husband were questioned, as were a 30-year-old former Ocean Club bus driver and his 24-year-old and 53-year-old associates. The bus driver and associates had telephoned or texted each other near the Ocean Club around the time of the disappearance. They admitted to having broken into Ocean Club apartments, but denied having taken Madeleine. So here we have the problem. And this is, I guess, how they ruled out, or how they wanted to not connect the burglary gone wrong possibility. So, again, this is 2007. So yes, cell phones are on the rise, but 2007 is not 2017. In 2017, everybody would be using their phones and texting at any given second. So in 2007, they'd be a bit more limited. Now, what's interesting is that they found that these burglars, by using this information, so, because initially, just because people are calling each other and texting each other doesn't mean they're involved in a crime, but they were in this case. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? So the coincidence theorists might have wrote that off, but it turns out that when you align variables, certain locations, time periods, cell phone text activity, you actually get viable connections. Now, I don't know how they determined they didn't take Madeleine. I mean, I don't know. It's rough, but they were definitely criminals and burglars. So, and they were around. Now, the question is, if they were burglaring these apartments, and if one of these guys is the ugly blonde guy, wouldn't they have noticed other criminal activity? Like, let's say there is a child trafficking ring. Would a group of burglars who are very familiar with the area, former employees, would they have heard things? Would they have heard things or known people involved in kidnapping children, in trafficking humans? Or would they have actually seen, if they're casing the area, if these are the same people? I mean, it'd be coincidental if these individuals, I mean, I don't know, how many different rings of burglars would be running that night and at that time? Or is the ugly blonde man not one of these guys? So the ugly, was there two group of people here? Were there the traffickers scoping everything out and the burglars who also scoped things out to a lesser extent? It's quite bizarre, right? But would these burglars have seen other shady individuals? Because they could have theoretically, if it wasn't the McCanns, if it wasn't the parents, they could have theoretically seen who was there. They might have seen other shady individuals. Did they tell police? I don't know if they're criminals themselves or if they want to cut a deal, or they could just make up a description, right? If they wanted to cut a deal. A lot of possibilities here. German investigations in 2020. In June 2020, the public prosecutor of the German city of Braunschweig ordered an inquiry regarding a possible involvement of a 43-year-old male believed to have been living in a borrowed Volkswagen camper van in the Algarve at the time of the McCann's disappearance. The car of the suspect, a Jaguar XJR6, was registered to a new owner the day after the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. Now, this is gonna, even the coincidence theorists have to at least bat an eye to this, because, I mean, I don't know. That's weird. The prosecutor's office started proceedings on suspicion of McCann's murder. Hans Christian Walters, from the public prosecutor's office, stated they are operating under the presumption that McCann is dead due to the suspect's criminal record. The suspect has been convicted of unrelated offenses of sexual abuse of children and drug trafficking and is currently incarcerated. The suspect was named in the media as Christian Brookner, currently in jail for the rape of a 72-year-old pensioner in the Algarve. On the evening of June 3rd, the German federal police made a public appeal for information relating to the case at Achtenzeichen XY Ungelost, a crime program broadcast by the public television station ZDF. The police stated that they received useful information in 2013 after the case was first featured, but that it took years to find substantial evidence for prosecution and that they still need more information. The prosecutors asked the public whether they have information about two Portuguese phone numbers, the suspect's phone number and the number that dialed him on the day of Madeleine's disappearance, and with which the suspect's number had a 30-minute connection on the same day. Again, 2007 is not 2017. Very, very curious. And it's just really bizarre. So was this guy a trafficker? Did he deliver her to someone else? Was the sighting in Morocco legitimate? All things we don't know. Let's look at other inquiries. In the early days of the inquiry, the Portuguese police searched through images seized from pedophile investigation, and Madeleine's parents were shown photographs of sex offenders in case they recognized them from Praia da Luz. I mean, they should have showed them to every single person in that area, right? Several British pedophiles were of interest. In May 2009, investigators working for the McCanns tried to question one, Raymond Hewlett. He had allegedly told someone he knew what happened to Madeleine, but he retracted and died of cancer in Germany in December that year. Scotland Yard made inquiries about two pedophiles who had been in jail in Scotland since 2010 for murder. The men were running a window cleaning service in the Canary Islands when Madeleine went missing. A man from Northern Ireland who died in 2013 was discussed in the media in connection with the disappearance after being released from prison for the sexual assault of his 4 daughters. He had moved to Carvoeiro, Portugal, not far from Praia da Luz, and was there when Madeleine went missing. Another focus of Operation Grange was Urs Hans von Eisch, a deceased Swiss man implicated in the 2007 murder in Switzerland of a 5-year-old, Jelenia Lenhard. Jelenia disappeared on July 31st, 2007, nearly 3 months after Madeleine, and was found dead in September as a result of toluene poisoning. Von Eisch was living in Spain when Madeleine disappeared. In June 2016, Operation Grange officers interviewed an alleged victim of the deceased broadcaster Clement Freud, who was accused that year of having a history of child sexual abuse. Freud had a home in Praia da Luz and had befriended the McCanns in July 2006, weeks after the disappearance. His family said he was in the UK when Madeleine went missing. Clement Freud is, of course, the grandson of Sigmund Freud. Again, just when you think this case cannot get any more weird, cannot get any more bizarre, and this tangled web is not going to spin completely out of control in all directions, it does yet again. And this angle of the case, it might be the least looked at angle, but there is so much bizarre information regarding Sir Clement Freud, and obviously that needs a dedicated episode because there's just a ton, and the people he's connected to, just very, very bizarre. All right, so let's examine this new lead with this new suspect. This is right from BBC, June 4th, Dominic Cassiani article, Madeleine McCann, false turns and a final breakthrough. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann in May 2007 was a shocking family tragedy. A perfect holiday became the most awful event imaginable. And 13 years on, still no answers. For all the years that she has been missing, her parents and a small group of British police officers who took over the case in 2011 have not given up hope of finally discovering what happened. Now, with a potentially astonishing new lead on a known sex offender from Germany, the question is whether they are finally close to the truth after so many false turns. The article kind of outlines the issues with police and different focuses of different investigations that I just went over, and naming the parents as suspects. Okay, so of course, this cites this turning point. 2011, the McCanns lobbied the Prime Minister, David Cameron, to do more, and a senior Scotland Yard team were asked to review thousands of pages of evidence. That decision may prove the crucial turning point. The Metropolitan Police ended up with a list of 600 people they needed to find out more about, and ultimately 41 potential suspects. Behind the scenes, a tantalizing lead began to emerge. Stranger kidnaps of children are rare. They tend to involve calculating abusers who have thought carefully about how they will do it. People who have a plan and know the area where they will strike. Detectives reasoned that if Madeleine was kidnapped, the culprit could be German or Dutch, the two other predominant nationalities in the resort, along with British and Portuguese. In 2013, the German equivalent of BBC TV's Crime Watch launched an appeal asking for any information about two German-speaking men at Praia da Luz. That TV appeal led to a tip-off to German federal detectives, although it is not clear what it was or whether an individual was named. Then, around the 10th anniversary of Madeleine's disappearance, the German federal police received more information that did identify a man who set alarm bells ringing. Someone whose name has been known to Scotland Yard. According to the German federal police, the man is a sex offender. They have called him a predator who has been convicted of offenses against girls and is currently in prison. He is also known to be a burglar with experience of breaking into apartments. It'd be interesting to note if there were multiple different groups of burglars operating, or when there was this known burglary ring operating, did other individuals like this guy decide to jump in knowing or thinking that their burglary would be blamed on the others? Between 1995 and 2007, he was living a transient lifestyle in the Algarve and odd jobbing and catering. At the same time, he is believed to have burgled holiday apartments and hotels and dealt drugs. They now know this man was close to the McCann holiday apartment at the critical time on the night she disappeared in 2007, and he received a half-hour phone call from an unknown person. He had been using two vehicles, a Volkswagen camper van and a Jaguar, with the British-made car having been re-registered to another person the day after Madeleine disappeared. Was this the guy arguing with the other guy that a witness overheard? Were they arguing about the price of a car or something? Because he's trying to get out of there? He has also been connected to two properties, one of which German police have described as a hideaway for stolen goods. Both homes are small, villas on quiet country lanes. One is a 10-minute drive from Praia da Luz. The other lies just over a mile away and is in turn just a mile from grassy land where police carried out an extensive search in 2014. Who is the suspect? Neither German investigators nor Scotland Yard will confirm the name, but German media have identified him as Christian B. Did this man take Madeleine McCann? Was a dangerous sex offender effectively hiding in plain sight in the middle of a peaceful holiday town? It would not be the first time. Almost everywhere in the world there are stories of predatory offenders locating themselves in resorts. At the moment, we just don't know, but one thing is certain in the minds of the German police who may unlock this tragedy. They believe Madeleine McCann is dead. And while her disappearance has always been a missing person inquiry in the UK, in Germany, this is now a hunt for the final clues that could catch a murderer. This was a statement from Rothley in Leicestershire. We would like to thank the police forces involved in their continuing efforts in the search for Madeleine. All we have ever wanted is to find her, uncover the truth, and bring those responsible to justice. We will never give up hope of finding Madeleine alive, but whatever the outcome may be, we need to know as we need to find peace. A Downing Street spokesman said the latest developments appeared to be significant, and Number 10's thoughts were with the McCann family who have had to endure so much. Police said the suspect was one of 600 people that detectives on the UK inquiry originally looked at, though he may not have been a suspect. After a 10-year anniversary appeal in 2017, significant fresh information about him was provided. So that's actually really interesting because, did they actually interview him? Because they looked at him. What does that mean? Was there an extensive interview with him? And how did they rule him out? But they said that he was not one of the 41 suspects. So he was one of the 600 persons of interest that they wanted to interview, but he was not one of the 41 they narrowed down to. It's quite interesting on why not. Could they have found him out earlier if he is indeed responsible? Obviously, this is far from 100% definitive. He is a suspect in the case. The case is not closed. So here's everything that's known about Christian Brookner. So this is from the Daily Mail. This was posted today, June 5th, 2020. German prosecutors to search abandoned box factory where they found child abuse images belonging to Madeleine McCann's suspect, Christian Brookner, as they reopened the investigation into unsolved abduction of girl 5 in the woods in 2015. And these cases are, of course, so tragic, especially when they're not solved, so the perpetrator can go on and keep doing it. So, blonde and blue-eyed Inga Gerich, 5, disappeared from Saxony-Anhalt in Germany, May 2nd, 2015. She vanished 48 miles away from where Christian Brookner lived in a caravan in an abandoned factory. It's got horror movie written all over it. Police investigated Brookner for weeks in 2016 over Inga's disappearance, which was compared to Maddie's. Prosecutors have opened a preliminary investigation into whether Brookner was involved in the Inga case. Police will search an abandoned box factory in Germany where the prime suspect in the Madeleine McCann case lived in a caravan shortly after a 5-year-old girl vanished nearby in 2015, it was revealed today. Prosecutors have reopened the investigation into whether Christian Brookner abducted Inga Gerich after she was grabbed from Dieckanawick Wilhelmshaven in Saxony-Anhalt during a family outing 5 years ago. Her disappearance May 2nd, 2015, almost 8 years to the day after Madeleine vanished in Portugal on May 3rd, 2007, was only 48 miles away from where Brookner lived in the ramshackle 5-acre in the isolation of the village of Neuersluben, southeast of Hanover. More than 100 officers descended on the old box factory in February 2016, digging holes looking for Inga's body. The little girl wasn't found, but Brookner's USB stash of child abuse images was found on a USB stick hidden under animal bones, with police now set to return, according to German tabloid Bild. Brookner was prosecuted over the images, but he was never charged with Inga's disappearance when the probe was dropped after 4 weeks. But today, prosecutors confirmed they have reopened a preliminary investigation into whether he was involved in the unsolved Inga case. So, Brookner was born 1976, Christian Fischer in Würzburg, Bavaria. His adopted takes the name Brookner. In 1994, at age 17, he molests a 6-year-old girl in Wurzburg. 1995, he moves to Praia da Luz in Portugal after serving part of a 2-year sentence. In 2005, he rapes a 72-year-old American tourist. In 2007, Madeleine McCann disappears on holiday in Praia da Luz. Bruckner moves back to Germany shortly after. 2008, spends time living in Augsburg, traveling regularly to Sylt and Munich, selling drugs. 2011, sentenced to 21 months for drug smuggling. 2014, runs a kiosk in Braunschweig. 2015, the disappearance of 5-year-old Inga Gerich. Briefly returns to Algarve, where he sells campervan at Center of Inquiry. 2016, German court finds him guilty of abuse of a child with possession of child abuse images. 2017, becomes suspect in McCann case after allegedly telling friend he knew all about what happened to her. Is this the first time he mentioned it? Took 10 years to mention it? Or did other people simply not say anything because they're criminals or whatnot? They don't want to be involved with tipping off police. 2018, arrested in Milan over the 2005 rape, sentenced to 7.5 years in Kiel prison where he remains. It came as documents revealed by Spiegel allegedly show Bruckner fantasized in disgusting online chats about the kidnapping and abuse of a child in September 2013. He is said to have told one acquaintance he wanted to capture something small and use it for days, and that it would be safer if the evidence is destroyed afterwards. As police tried to gather evidence to charge him with Madeleine McCann's abduction, it also emerged today. Bruckner is allegedly going to be eligible for parole this weekend, having served 2/3 of a sentence for drug charges at Kiel prison in Germany. The mysterious caller who spoke with Bruckner minutes before Madeleine was abducted has been named as Diogo Silva by Portuguese media. More details of a child abuse has emerged, including an attack on a 9-year-old and exposing himself to a 6-year-old. Madeleine's parents have been encouraged by the results of the latest appeal, with Scotland Yard already receiving more than 270 calls and emails. A friend who lived above his shop claims he was violent, beating up his underage Kosovan girlfriend and cruelly locking up his dogs in a shop for weeks. Yeah, this guy's got a lot of problems. Bruckner is said to have had a relationship with an unnamed British woman while living in Praia da Luz in 2004. It is believed that police investigated Bruckner, 43, February 26th, over the disappearance of Inga. Okay. Mr. Kulme, who was calling for a new investigation, told Volksstimme the file was closed again only 4 weeks after starting work. I think that's not very ambitious. However, Stendal Public Prosecutor's Office spokesman Berthe Iliev said today it is now being examined whether there is new evidence in connection with the murder suspect in Braunschweig. Bruckner, who has been labeled a multiple sexual predator by prosecutors, is said to have been convicted of a child sex offense in Germany when aged just 17. Yet the drifter, who reportedly has as many as 17 criminal convictions, was apparently overlooked by Portuguese police during their Madeleine probe. Bruckner, who is in jail in Kiel, Germany, was also convicted of raping a 72-year-old U.S. widow in her Algarve home 18 months before Madeleine disappeared. But Bruckner only became a suspect for Scotland Yard in 2017 when he is said to have told a friend at a bar he knew all about what happened to Madeleine. Scotland Yard's Operation Grange received more than 270 calls and emails less than 24 hours after revealing the details of the new suspect. So this is more information about Bruckner, Jaguar-driving wannabe playboy who was actually a drug-dealing drifter and child sex predator. Cruising the Algarve in his classic Jaguar, Christian Brookner posed as a fun-loving playboy. The German drifter spent 12 years pursuing a bohemian lifestyle, but not long after Madeleine McCann vanished in 2007, he left Portugal and returned to his homeland. It was in a German bar exactly 10 years later, on the anniversary of the 3-year-old's disappearance, that Beck's drinking Bruckner turned the spotlight on himself. And, that's yet another pile of coincidences there. So he happened to tell somebody on the exact anniversary, the 10-year anniversary. I don't know. The coincidence theorists that are still maintaining that it's the parents no matter what, I wonder what they think about this new information, because this is a big stack of coincidences now. As Madeleine's face flashed up on the bar's television screen, he reportedly turned to his drinking partner and claimed he knew all about the case. He is alleged to have said something to suggest he knew what had happened to Maddie, according to a report on Sky News. Later, it is claimed he showed his companion a video of himself raping an elderly American widow in Portugal in 2005. The friend contacted German police. Wait, so this guy videotapes his crimes and he just shows them to random people? Or I guess he thought this guy was his friend, but even then, this is really bizarre. Obviously, this is a very disturbed individual. Do the coincidences point to him being responsible for Madeleine McCann's disappearance, though? Bruckner, who chose a moniker for his Facebook page that means madness in German, swiftly became of interest to detectives probing Madeleine's disappearance. It was 3 more years before his name became public. Photographs obtained by the Mail show blue-eyed Bruckner enjoying a night out in a Hanover bar in 2011. Wearing a pinstripe blazer, the self-styled Romeo appeared to be enjoying himself with a group of friends. One picture shows him cradling a small dog. Last night, one friend told the Mail that Bruckner's life situation was a bit chaotic, but added that if everything is true, then he was indeed a master of illusion. So, more details about the vehicle. Bruckner retained his prized 93 Jaguar XJR6. The day after Madeleine vanished, he re-registered the classic British car to someone else, even though he was still driving it. Another bizarre detail there. In fact, the Renaissance man image he seemed desperate to cultivate, Bruckner, 43, has long tried to hide a gruesome life of crime ranging from petty thefts to horrific sexual assaults. Born in 1976, Bruckner was raised in a home, according to German news magazine Focus. He committed his first burglary in his hometown of Wurzburg in Bavaria when he was just 15. Within 2 years, he was convicted of sexually abusing a child, earning him a 2-year youth sentence in 1994. A report by Germany's Der Spiegel claims he served only part of this term. Bruckner went on to top-notch convictions for drug dealing, driving under the influence, and without a license, the news magazine reported. As a young man, Bruckner is said to have dreamed of emigrating with his girlfriend of the time. After turning 18 and acquiring a license, he took off to the Algarve town of Lagos with his girlfriend, the German newspaper Bild reported. It quotes him as saying, "We didn't know anything about Portugal. We went to Lagos because we liked the name so much. We had a tent with us and camped in the wild." He eventually settled in Praia da Luz, the picturesque resort where the McCanns took their 3 children on holiday. Bruckner stayed there for 12 years, telling families he was working as a caterer and odd job man. In truth, he was dealing cannabis, trafficking drugs, and burglaring holiday homes and hotel rooms. He was briefly locked up for diesel theft and is also said to have traded passports and stolen goods, according to Bild. Now, the kind of people you come in contact with when trading passports and stolen goods, diesel, drugs, very, very bizarre. He initially lived in a dilapidated house accessed by a dirt road. In terms of furnishings, it was a typical bachelor's apartment, said one acquaintance. After a decade on the Algarve, Bruckner burglared a 72-year-old American widow and subjected her to a violent sexual assault, which he recorded on camera. By this time, Bruckner is thought to have been living in a rented, whitewashed villa on a remote hillside above the beach where the McCanns played during their week's holiday. Neighbors described him as an angry car dealer who raced along country roads. They say when he vanished, he left behind a collection of exotic clothing, including wigs and fancy dress. Bruckner left Portugal after Madeleine disappeared on May 3, 2007. The previous month, he had moved out of the villa and into a Volkswagen Westfalia camper van. Police have now linked this vehicle to Maddie's disappearance. That's all it says about that. Obviously, details will be emerging more, I assume, on that, to how exactly they linked that. Bruckner also retained his prized 93 Jaguar XJ-R6. Scotland Yard has now revealed that the day after Madeleine vanished, Bruckner re-registered the classic British car to someone else, even though he was still driving it. After returning to Germany, Bruckner continued stealing and drug dealing. In October 2011, a district court in the northern state of Schleswig-Holstein sentenced him to 1 year, 9 months for a crime involving narcotics in large quantities. The term was initially suspended. By 2014, Bruckner was living in Braunschweig near Hanover, where he boasted to friends he had opened a local shop. He claimed he worked from 7 in the morning until midnight, but the business, along with his relationship, failed, and he began to hit the bottle and live on benefits. In 2016, he was sentenced to 1 year, 3 months imprisonment for sexually abusing a child in the act of procuring himself and possessing child pornography. After his barroom claims about Madeleine in May 2017, Bruckner appears to have returned to the Algarve. Within a month, he was held under European arrest warrant and extradited back to Germany. That September, he was sentenced to another year in prison for the sexual abuse of a child, according to Thomas Kling, spokesman for the Hanover Public Prosecutor's Office. After his release in August 2018, he later told the court he was homeless, spending nights sleeping on park benches. He traveled to Milan, but within a month he was arrested and extradited to Germany yet again, this time to face trial for drug offenses. October 2018, he was convicted of dealing drugs and sent to prison in Kiel in Schleswig-Holstein, where he remains to this day. Prosecutors also had enough evidence to charge him with the horrific sex attack he had filmed 13 years earlier. His rape trial took place last December. Reports of proceedings describe Bruckner as eloquent and state he leafed through legal texts as evidence was heard. He called what had happened to the traumatized pensioner a bad deed, but denied any role in it. In court, he repeatedly mentioned the names of ex-lovers, insisting they would testify as to the normalcy of his sex life. He branded witnesses as liars and claimed that DNA from a strand of hair used to convict him must have ended up on the victim's bed after he had petted one of her cats. Yet, as so often before, the court rejected his denials and Bruckner was sentenced to 7.5 years pending the outcome of an appeal. One trial witness describes Bruckner as someone who always paid attention to his appearance. As the Madeleine case enters a dramatic new phase, there will certainly be a lot more attention paid to him now. He gave me his Jaguar, but he never mentioned Maddie, says friend who let Christian Brookner live in his attic after he fled Praia da Luz. A friend of Christian Brookner let him live in his attic just after he had fled Praia da Luz and even looked after the Jaguar at the center of the Madeleine McCann probe, it was revealed today. This is still unimaginable, said Augsburg resident Alexander Bischoff, who says he met him 12 or 13 years ago. He said he needed help and was looking for an apartment in Augsburg. He was driving a Jaguar which he bought from the mutual acquaintance. Because I'm also a Jaguar lover and we had a topic of conversation right away, said Bischoff. At one point he offered Bruckner the opportunity to stay with him and his wife if he wanted to. He said Bruckner was often underway. Sometimes he traveled to Portugal, sometimes to Sylt, to Munich. In between, he spent nights sleeping in my attic. Otherwise, he stayed in his Volkswagen bus. Most of the time, he went to Portugal, where he's said to have had a girlfriend. Once, he took them into Augsburg to meet his girlfriend, where they spoke to each other in English. At some point, I reached the conclusion that he was involved with drugs, he added, and was in prison in Portugal for 2 or 3 months, during which time he handed over the Jaguar car to him. When he came out, he was back here quickly. I didn't know more at the time, he said. Later, he gave the car over to an acquaintance in Munich. He always made surprisingly quick decisions, he added. I thought I couldn't do that, Bishop said. After a few years, Bischoff or Bishop? Typo here. After a few years, the law stood at my door. The police wanted to search the living quarters where he had stayed. At that time, he learned that he had some things in his past. He did not know what. Only that it would be a capital crime. During a reinterrogation, the officials mentioned the name Maddie. When Bischoff first heard about the murder allegations, he was shocked. He said, "We never talked about young children. Our conversations were about cars, football, and Portugal. Men's stuff." His view over Maddie's resort. 25 minutes walk from Praia da Luz, home where suspect lived at the time of 3-year-old's abduction, and which neighbors say he left a ramshackle mess. Nestled into the hillside, this is the remote farmhouse which gave Christian Brookner unrivaled views of Praia da Luz. The convicted child sex offender is now a key suspect in the disappearance of Madeleine McCann in May 2007. When Brookner lived in the farmhouse above Praia da Luz, he seldom mixed with his neighbors and allowed the property to fall in disrepair. Last night, one neighbor told the Daily Mail, "I immediately recognized him from the pictures in the media. He kept to himself and lived with a girlfriend for some of the time." I wonder if this girlfriend was identified and interviewed. What does she say about all this? Brookner, now 43, is understood to have lived in the farmhouse from 1999 to 2006 and may have been living in a distinctive camper van at the time Madeleine disappeared. The single-story property is surrounded by disused water wells. Uh-oh. They definitely need to search all those. And sits on a hillside which leads onto a footpath to the beach where the little girl played. It also sits close to where Madeleine's parents, Jerry and Kate, used to jog along the cliff top in search of solace during the aftermath of her disappearance. The farmhouse is a 25-minute walk to the Ocean Club complex where Madeleine was on holiday with her parents and her twin siblings, Sean and Amelie. In 2014, police sealed off an area of scrubland close to the farmland and used ground-penetrating radar to detect whether the soil had been disturbed. You know what's weird? I want to know what led them to that area, because they were searching that area, or were they just doing a blanket search, casting wider and wider out from the disappearance site? Another neighbor said of Brookner last night, he moved in the mid-90s with a German girlfriend who left around a year and a half later. They seemed to have a tempestuous relationship. I would hear them arguing. I knew very little about his life, but he seemed to me to be a choleric man. Another added he had a fallout with another German he sublet the place to for around 6 months. He treated him very badly. But I never for one moment suspected he could have anything to do with Madeleine McCann's disappearance. It's something that never even crossed my mind. His life was pretty much of a mystery to people around here. His girlfriend left a long time ago, and she hasn't been seen around here since. A third neighbor said, "This is an idyllic spot, and we're all proud of our houses and look after them. But this guy let his place go to ruin. He left it looking a right mess, and it took the owner some time to make it right." The owner of the property is a British man who rented it to the German suspect and his girlfriend. The homeowner, who asked to remain anonymous, said both UK and Portuguese police have asked for his help relating to background information on Brookner. He said, "In 2006, my neighbor contacted me in the UK to say that the house had been left ramshackle and abandoned with no sign of occupancy." So he abandoned this property 1 month before the McCann disappearance to live in the van full-time. Very strange. We returned to Portugal and reported the disappearance to the Portuguese police and later discovered that he may have been arrested. This was the last time we heard from him until about a year ago when we were contacted by the UK and Portuguese police requesting what information we had that they were following a new line of inquiry relating to this person. Speaking to Sky News, he added, "My wife and I moved back to the UK in 92. The house was let out to friends and friends of friends to maintain occupancy, look after the land, and pay the bills. The house was occupied for a period of time by what seemed like an ordinary young couple trying to get by in Portugal. Living in England, we had relatively little interaction besides talk of the house, the land, and any maintenance issues. We met in person when passing through on family holidays to the Algarve. At a later date, we discovered that the man's girlfriend had parted company and returned to Germany. Police are now trying to trace Brookner's ex-girlfriend to establish a full picture of the suspect's movements on the Algarve. She is thought to have left Praia before Madeleine's disappearance. Brookner, a known drifter, also spent time dog-sitting for German friends at a house in Monte Giudeo, a few miles from the seaside. Bungled from the start, taking so long to suspect a man with Christian Brookner's profile is just the latest in a long line of apparent blunders that have dogged the Madeleine McCann inquiry, right from those first fateful hours. According to German law enforcement officials, Brookner lived almost permanently in the Algarve between 1995 and 2007. Portuguese police closed the inquiry into Madeleine's disappearance in 2008 after claiming there were no more leads to pursue. The inquiry was shelved after the missing girl's parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, were wrongfully implicated in the case. And he was on the list of the later investigation, but the prolific criminal. He's doing a 7-year jail term. Julian Reichelt, editor-in-chief of Bild, said the new key suspect who is fighting his rape conviction is currently in prison in the German city Kiel. Not revealing the suspect's full name, Mr. Reichelt said, "Everything we have heard so far publicly has been around and basically known to police in Germany and Britain for years. We are hearing that there was an additional push towards looking at Christian B another time, and that's when the police reviewed all the pieces again and opened a murder investigation. He has been convicted of child abuse as early as 1994. He was born in 76. He's 43 years old. This means early in his life there was already a record of child abuse, and it wasn't the only time." And the article just goes on to the botched issues, the phone clues that were not properly pursued. With German prosecutors saying they believe Madeleine is dead, there appears to be very little cause for optimism. Her case now effectively a murder investigation. Forensic tests on Bruckner's old camper van have not yielded any clues. With no body, no forensic evidence, and no confession, detectives may struggle to gain justice for her and her family. But there seems to be quite a few coincidences to go on here. So if they, and if they find his ex-girlfriend, she might have some things to say. There possibly could have been other crimes, etc. Yeah, it's a very, very bizarre case. Obviously, explanation is needed for all the dog activity regarding the apartment and the car, and the rental car, because that seems to be what cast the suspicion on the McCanns, which, again, this whole thing is just very, very bizarre. So all the listeners out there, questions, theories of your own, any thoughts of any kind that can explain this investigation, which has been one of the most expensive and exhausting in recent history. So, again, if you enjoy the podcast in comprehensive, exhaustive fashion, as this episode has been, feel free to donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. If you like the podcast, hit the like button. Share it across social media platforms. You could also check us out on Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case and topic requests. Plenty more to come with both new information and examining other avenues and theories that still have not been carefully looked at, including if this Bruckner guy wasn't necessarily acting alone. So there's a lot to go over here. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.